are secure. So what is this prompt? Let me show you. Okay, just zooming in so you guys could see this. This was posted in one of my older courses, specifically in a module called Security for Vibe-Coded Apps. So what I'm going to do, now that I'm done with everything, is I'm just going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. As you can see, it's pretty chunky. It's pretty large. And then I'm just going to go back to Claude. Then I'm going to feed that in. So I'm now, before I run this, I'm going to clear all of my conversation history. So I'm running with a fresh instance of Claude that doesn't have any of the context of our prior conversation. And now that we're down to 0 tokens again, I'm just going to Command V, paste in this giant string, and just have it go on its way. And so basically what this thing is, if I show you guys a couple of key points, it is a comprehensive list plus formatting of ways to identify and then solve the major low-hanging fruit, which typically involves specific vulnerability patterns like hallucinated packages, missing server-side validation, default open database policies, hard-coded secrets, and inconsistent auth middleware for your mobile app. So, as mentioned, you don't need to know what's going on under the hood here, and you're not going to be able to 100% solve all security, but you'll get pretty close. And then after, what we do is we basically have it rank it in a big tier list here alongside the security finding number. So you'll see there'll be a lot of security findings, maybe like 50 or 60 or something. And it's just going to go methodically top to bottom, telling us whether or not we have a critical severity, high severity, medium severity, or low severity vulnerability, what sort of category it is, the location of it, and then the CWE, which I think is a particular acronym that I'm forgetting, that deals with security. Yeah, it's called Common Weakness Enumeration, which is basically just a list of the common ways that people usually get access to apps. Okay, so I'm not going to run through absolutely everything. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to show you guys what the actual output is. And you'll see that there are actually a fair number of vulnerabilities already, which kind of sucks. So scrolling up all the way to the very, very top of this, okay, you could see that we've passed the hard-coded secrets vulnerability. That's great. What that means is we're basically just not pasting our API key anywhere but in this file right over here or in Supabase itself. Git ignore coverage, though, is partial. And so that's something that we can fix. Public prefix leaks, okay? So we are past that. Console error leaks, partial, okay? Startup validation is a complete and utter fail, okay? And because it's a complete and utter fail, it's obviously something we're going to have to fix. Just scrolling through here, there are very few that are 100% fails. Most of these are partials, which is good. Protected API routes, for instance, that's a major fail, and that's actually kind of chunky, so I'm glad we sorted that out. Error information leak, so there's a lot of info that comes out when we run like a console script or something like that. So we're going to fix that. Expensive operations. So there are some things that are pretty expensive. And this basically says that an attacker, if they just wanted to take us down, could run this sort of thing over and over and over and over and over again to burn our Claude tokens. There's some other, issues and so on and so forth. But basically, once we've loaded all this stuff in, I'm going to ask it, okay, great, run through and fix all of these errors end to end. After you're done, test and ensure they're 100% solved. Okay, and the first time that you run this and then have it, solve these problems, it'll go through and it'll say, hey, I just solved all these problems, you're good to go. But we're not just going to run this once. What I've come to realize is that sometimes in solving one problem, it creates another somewhere else. And so after we solve this first run through, I'm actually just going to clear it and then run a totally new prompt again to see if a future version of Claude can spot issues that a past version of Claude has created. Once we're done with that, okay, after we did 2, I'm like 90% satisfied with most of the security alterations. Obviously, if you're a big CS security guy, you're probably over here shaking your head and you're like, you should be manually going through all the code yourself and so on and so forth. But I mean, the whole idea behind AI is to massively multiply my leverage, right? Sure, I could 100% verify that every line in this code is written in a specific way, but even human beings make mistakes. And so me going through all of that manually is unlikely to be much better than me doing a couple of passes of this. Now, if you are launching an app and scaling it to hundreds of thousands of users, of course, maybe that's a little bit different. And I'd recommend, actually having like a whole team of people that review things and so on and so forth, just to minimize your actual attack surface. But in my case, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the top of this prompt, and I'm just going to paste it in again a second time. Okay. So I'm going to let that run one more time. I'm going to see if there are any additional issues. And again, it has no context of the former fixes, so it's just going to see and identify any new generated vulnerabilities or ones that the previous one couldn't catch. And you can see a lot of the previous failures are now either passes or partials. And so the get ignore coverage, for instance, that hasn't changed. The startup validation went from fail to partial. Severities are now low. Same thing with a couple of these other ones like schema validations and unused dependencies and so on and so on and so forth. Same thing with the expensive operations as well. I'll say great work, fix all things, even if they're partial. Once sorted, let me know if the changes produced new vulnerabilities. And we'll just go through same thing top to bottom. And at this point, we've gotten basically as far as we can in app development without actually pushing this to the App Store. There are a few ways that you could test this further on your device if you wanted to actually have a little app widget that you clicked on that immediately opened your app. The way that we're currently doing it, Expo, is the freest and it's the straightest line path to doing so. It also doesn't take any time. But if you wanted to run this, let's say on an iOS device, you could sign up for Test Flight at this point, which is a specific Apple developer program where you submit your app to a review team. The team reviews it within 24 hours, and then you have the ability to give, I think, up to 1,000 or 10,000 users a link to the app just to test and so on and so forth. We're not going to do that because I think Expo covers the 80/20. What we're going to do is I'm just going to move on to building a bunch more apps now with you, now that we understand the full way through. I'll level them up, make them significantly more complex and also sexy. And then finally, we'll get to the end of the course. I'll actually submit the apps directly to the App Store. And then after the review period, I'll run them on my phone and so on and so forth, just to make sure that it's 100% good. Okay, let's move on to our next app, which is going to take all the same sort of functionality that we built with these apps. So, the ability to add things to a database, the ability to read things from that database, the ability to do things like push notifications on your phone, the ability to have AI run synchronously, while you're using the app, as well as while you're not using the app to generate notifications and so on and so forth. The ability to connect with OAuth providers and also do authentication through Supabase. And then also the ability to contact and work with however many APIs you need. Let's take all that same functionality, but let's combine it in a much slimmer and tighter and faster and sexier form package, which I'm going to do in the guise of a Cal Tracker app, very similar to Cal.ai, that app that recently sold for between $50 to $100 million. So let me run you guys through exactly how all that's going to work. All right, now that we've done one core app walkthrough, and I've shown you guys the general high-level process of walking through an MVP all the way to an actual finished product, a live app that works on your cell phone, mind you, without the App Store bit, which I'll get into at the end of this course. Let's standardize it, and let's create a couple of additional apps in a much more accelerated fashion. So the very first thing we have to do is, we have to actually standardize or outline the framework. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to call this App Design Framework. And then I'm just going to walk you through more or less everything that we've actually done in order to get this far. So if you think about it, the first thing we have to do is we have to do MVP ideation. And the MVP ideation is basically just this right over here, right? We need to come up with the one thing, map the action to reward cycle, add only what supports the loop, ensure that there are only 5 to maybe 7 screens total, then have some sort of retention hook that keeps people using the app. So we'll do that for our next one. But basically what I'm saying is you have to start with the MVP ideation. If you don't at least have a rough idea of what you're building before you start building, you're probably not going to have a very good time. Okay, and after the MVP ideation, what we have to do is we have to build. Now that building process, a lot of the time ends up just being, use a voice transcription tool like I'm using down over here. And then you just dump it in, have Claude run through at least one build, and then you have something that's kind of workable. Now I'm going to add one additional step between build and then test, and that's going to be to design. Now in the Habit Tracker app, I thought I'd just come up with a reasonable quality design initially, and I didn't really express very many opinions, but once you have the core sort of local app functionality built, it's very easy to take that functionality and just say, hey, I want you to, take the same layout, but then apply different styles to it, make it thematically different. Or I want it to look like this other app, or maybe this website, or I want it to have the feel of Apple, or maybe, Google or something like that. And basically, Claude will very quickly and easily be able to spin the design in as many different ways as you want. There's actually a whole emerging class of SaaS businesses that just take pre-existing app functionality, so apps that other people have built, and then just tweak or spin the design 5 or 10 different ways, moving around icons and stuff like that, so that it's more, agreeable to a certain subset of users. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. Anyway, after you've designed, obviously, we need to test. And our testing protocol actually consists of three smaller steps. The first step is obviously we have to do this on our computer. And so, whether you're doing an iOS or an iOS or an Android app, you're probably going to want to test it on something like Chrome locally, at least if we're using React Native and Expo. Once we're done, you can test via phone, but you can do so using a mirror. And that's what I was showing you guys earlier with the iPhone mirroring app. Similar examples exist for Android as well. And then after you're done with the mirror, I'd recommend testing on phone. And that's like your real, actual phone. And the reason why is because, it's very easy to standardize testing on the computer and then just get it over and done with. And if you catch an issue here, then you can solve it before propagating down to the mirror and then ultimately the real phone. When you do mirror testing, it's usually a lot easier, again, just to quickly swipe through using, functionality and usability that you already understand. So I don't know, using your little scroll wheel and going up and down, clicking on things with the computer and stuff. You're also not kind of going between devices, so you save a bit of time. And then finally, at the end, you actually go all the way down the stack and test with your phone. Because as mentioned, there are a couple of key pieces of functionality that you just can't get on the computer. And that is things like push notifications, for instance, or like haptic feedback, which you can't get on the mirror as well. And so basically, after we're done with this test, we add a database, because everything up until now has just been done locally. That database will also include some form of auth. And so in our case, we're using Supabase and so on and so forth. So that's actually really easy. You guys have already seen me do that once. And then after you add the database, because we've now fundamentally changed the way that the app works, we've also introduced a lot of opportunities for failure, right? The database is fundamentally going to work a little bit differently. Those are sending requests over to another server. And, in the case of implementing like an on-auth mechanism, for instance, there may be some friction when like you use Google sign-in or even email and password sign-in. So what you do after you add the database is you have to test again. And this test again is basically going to be the exact same thing that we did over here. So very straightforward. We're basically just repeating this process. And then afterwards, you're going to want to do a security audit. And that audit is necessary because, back over here, if you think about it, we were doing stuff locally. But after adding the database and the authentication, stuff like that, now this is technically live. This is something that's like occurring on the internet and anybody could use it. And then after we're done with the security audit, if you think about it, the last thing we do is you do a third end-to-end test, and then we deploy. And I'm using the term deployment here sort of generally. This could include submitting to the App Store. It could include pushing your app to like, a live production repository on GitHub or something like that if it's already up and running. Whether you're implementing a whole app or a new feature, this is the exact same flow. Basically, you just repeat it over and over and over and over again. And so in our case, that last deploy feature, which I'm going to show you guys at the end, is going to involve bundling our app up into a nice, sexy package and then actually submitting it to the App Store. Okay, so what am I going to do now? I'm just going to duplicate the same flow another 2 times to show you fundamentally different types of apps that now, use your camera, apps that have like way different functionality. And we're just going to run through this a couple of times just to really get that muscle in. Okay, so the very first thing we need to do for our next app is MVP ideation. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this down here and I'm just going to brainstorm the next app that I want to build. And this is me kind of cheating, but basically the next stack I want to build is sort of like a Cal AI lookalike. And the reason why is because, as mentioned, this app sold for $50 to $100 million. And I also think it's like a great example of using AI functionality. Essentially, the way that it works, and you can see the number of screens is pretty limited here. This just tracks your calories on a day-to-day basis. And it's actually not that fundamentally different from our habit tracker. Just stay with me here for a sec. We have some sort of daily log. On that daily log, we have a certain number of calories that like we desire eating. And so typically you'd set that up in some sort of onboarding screen, just like you'd select your habits. As the day goes on, you can add or track different things. That'll fill up the number of calories, just like it fills up our challenge goal. The only real additional piece of functionality is we're just going to be sending pictures of what it is that we're scanning over to AI. And the way that Cal AI works is they also hook up to like a couple of databases that have barcodes and food labels and stuff like that. I'm just going to leave that functionality out because I think the core loop really is that take a picture of your food and get the estimated number of calories. And, I should note that this core piece of functionality is reasonably accurate, but it's still plus or minus maybe 10 to 15% calories. There are just a lot of things that AI can't know about foods, like, how deep the dish is and stuff like that. So, we're not actually expecting this to be 100% accurate with calorie trackers. We're just using the state-of-the-art functionality and getting about as good as these guys get with theirs. Okay, and then obviously, after you take a photo, you can see the calories. You can track your progress. Notice how they have very few screens. This says home, this says progress. I think this says groups, and that says profile, although it's kind of blurry for me. And then, they also have some social sort of functionality, and I'm probably going to leave that part out. Okay, so the core app loop is basically going to be right over here. We're going to grab these four, and I'm going to run you guys through what that process looks like. And then for design, we're just going to like flip the design a little bit. It'll look a little bit different, maybe even a little bit better. Who knows? Okay, so I'm now just going to voice dump all of this into one big prompt. So I'm going to double tap here. I'm using an app framework where I define a core function, then a core loop, then accessory features, then minimize the surface area, and then finally add some sort of retention hook at the end. My goal is to build an app similar to Cal AI. My core function will be the ability to track your calories and then take a screenshot of a piece of food, have that sent over to an AI image processor, and then return the probable number of calories as well as macronutrients. From there, we can add calories to our daily, goal, alongside protein, carbs, and then fats. The main action to reward cycle will revolve around hitting your calorie goals on a day-to-day basis, as well as your macro goals. And also some sort of like visual stimulation every time you track and actually add something to the app. Because again, the whole idea is we want to have users return to the app over and over and over again every time they want to log a meal. In terms of accessory features, we want a couple of things. We want the ability to track your progress. So you need to be able to visualize this, see it sort of laid out in front of you in a chart type view. You need to have a calendar, which sort of goes back over time so you could see what previous logged entries were. You obviously need some sort of log in general, so the user should be able to see everything that's going on historically with all of their calorie tracked features. You should be able to have a clean interface where I take the photo and then send it over. And then you should have some nice sexy homepage that, talks about all of the various features that most people usually have in an app like this. In terms of surface area check, we're aiming for somewhere between 3 to 4 screens. We're probably going to want to have a home screen, which at a glance shows most of the functionality. We're going to want the ability to take a photo of the calories as mentioned. There's going to be some screen that pops up after you take the photo with the perceived nutritional information. The user should be able to make minor adjustments to that, maybe increase the calories or protein or whatever the heck, because sometimes AI calorie tracking functionality via photos is not accurate. And then finally, there needs to be a screen that allows them to track their progress too. You should probably also add a settings page, assuming that doesn't bump us over the 5 to 7 max screen limit. And then for retention hook, you're just going to want to add push notifications to the app to bring people back repeatedly. Hey, have you tracked your breakfast yet? Have you tracked your lunch yet? Have you tracked your dinner yet? And so on and so forth, as well as periodic notifications congratulating people on streaks. So build some sort of streak functionality in as well. We'll do all of this locally to start, and then eventually migrate this over to, a database later. Okay, and then all we do is I'm just going to zoom in here. We're going to go New Window, and then I'm going to Open Folder. And then instead of Habit Tracker, I'm going to call this Cal Tracker. As you can see, we're big on the trackers. We're just going to repeat the exercise. So let me make this nice and pretty so you can see what I'm doing. Double tap on the page, open up Claude, and then this is where we're going to store all of our files and so on and so forth. Now, just like I did before, I mentioned that, we basically have Claude guide us through the Expo setup. I'm going to build a mobile app using Claude, Expo, and React Native. Should work on all devices. Scaffold me out the workspace in the current folder. Again, we don't actually have to do any of that downloading or anything like that ourselves. It'll actually just go through and do it all. And I should note, you could also just duplicate your habit tracker folder if you want to, and it'll scaffold it out very similarly to the habit tracker. You can then say like, hey, I want you to make some adjustments to this repo. Here's the new app and so on and so forth. I'm just trying to approach it from like a token minimization standpoint. And I also want to show you guys how easy it is to like create a totally new app every time. It's very straightforward. Okay, so you can see that this is what it's doing. Scaffolding the Expo project with TypeScript, file-based routing, and cross-platform support. I'm just going to wait until all this stuff is good to go. And now I'm just going to paste in my giant prompt. And because the voice transcript tool I'm using just allows me to like kind of keep it in my clipboard, I just held Command and pressed V. Now I have the entire app. So you can see here, it is going to take this, start scoping the functionality, and then actually build me my little MVP/demo. I'll circle back when this is done. All right, we've now passed our TypeScript test with 0 errors. That basically means that the code is technically compiling, it's technically finishing, which is nice. That doesn't actually mean that the app works for sure, though. So what we need to do is we need to actually test this locally on our computer. So I'll say, run this locally on my computer. I want to test via Chrome. Looks like we also need to add our Anthropic API key in settings to enable AI food photo analysis. Now, it would be nice to use totally new, not expiring key. I can't because, you can't actually take a look at this once you've created it. They only allow you to do so once. So I'm just going to create a new one in my current workspace, and I'm just going to call it Cal Tracker App. Okay, we'll go add. We'll copy that key over. Then I'll go back over here, and then I'll say this is my key. I'm just doing it because I'm going to want to actually test all that functionality. We're probably not going to be able to take a photo with our camera, unfortunately, but all good. Store this in a .env. And, you can see sometimes it'll actually say, don't paste the API keys in the chat. Again, I'm just sort of skipping a step. You can go here, go .env, and then create one. It just did right over here, which is nice. Okay, great. So with all that said, if I now go back to the actual app, you can see it's open right over here. So let me see what this would actually look like. And note the design is still quite low quality, obviously, because we haven't done any sort of customization or anything like that. Okay, and we have it open. I'm just going to zoom in a bit more so you guys could see. 200% I think is reasonable. And as you see, the very first thing we have is we have this 2,000 remaining calories. We then have protein, carbs, fat, and then today's log. I can click this button, take a photo, or choose from gallery, which is kind of nice. Okay, and I'm just going to grab a food picture. So why don't we go plate of rice and chicken or something. I'll just grab, I don't know, maybe this. That looks pretty easy, right? It's pretty easily interpretable. And I'll just open this in a new tab. Then I'm going to save this, and I'll say rice and chicken.jpg. So that looks pretty good. And I'm just going to pretend, for the purpose of this example, that I've actually just created this. I've actually just taken that photo with my camera. Okay, and we're just going to make this a little bit smaller here. I'll click Take Photo, and it'll open up my little file finder. And now you can see we're coming up with an issue. This .validate path is not a function, but we do have half of the functionality done, which is, we can actually upload a file, which is cool. So I'm going to say getting this when I upload an image / take a photo, and then I'll say fix. So that part's pretty good. I'm sure that'll sort it out in a second, but let's take a look at the progress and see how that looks. So May 2nd to May 8th. So we actually see, this is probably going to be like some form of calendar where you can see the number of calories that you've logged, which is kind of cool. Then we have our settings, which is where we can adjust how many calories, how much protein, how much carbs, how much fat. And we can even enable some notifications. And you can see when I did that, it said, should we allow notifications? So if I reload this now, we can actually put notifications on. You can see here, we're also getting some sort of issue. I'm saying this popped up when I accepted notifications, fix. I'm just going to dismiss this so I can see the rest of it. We also have the ability to change our Anthropic API key, which is quite nice. And it doesn't really look like I can exit out of this little error message. Okay, no, I can't. I just need to click on that. Cool. So while I was just testing this, me just feeding in those brief little adjustments to Claude, it's saying it's actually gone ahead and fixed it. So I now go to take a photo and I upload this. How's that looking? We're seeing failed to fetch. So now when I upload, it says failed to fetch, fix. We're just going to work our way progressively through this until we finish. We're now going to refresh. Let me see if I could take that photo. And now we actually have the analysis occurring, which is quite nice. And this is cool. This is cool. As you guys can see here, we now have the title, roasted chicken thigh with Spanish rice, which is nice. Number of calories in total, 650, protein 42, carbs 58, fat 26. We can actually adjust these if needed. But as you guys see, this is a very simple sort of UX, and we can now add that to the log. After we add, we get a cute little modal that says added to log. And then we have the number of calories remaining as well as what we filled it up with. That's really cool. So I like what's gone on so far. Okay, now we have a 1-day streak because we've logged, and we also have today's log. Now, what I think would be really cool is if I could click on this, I could actually go into that. So we don't currently have the ability to do this. And then progress, we see some of these numbers are starting to double up on each other. So that's an issue. It would be nice if I could edit stuff. So I'm going to add an edit functionality feature, which should toggle when I give it a click. Also, the way I want this calendar is I literally want a calendar. I don't just want that. So I'm just going to adjust all of these and feed that into AI. While I'm at it, I'm just going to test this little meal reminder toggle. Doesn't look like anything's happening right now, so I'm going to make sure to make a note of that and then send it over. Hey, the app looks great so far. I like the core feedback loop. I should be able to click on the pop-ups under today's log to edit the entries. So make sure there's a way to do that. I'm also noticing that the text is wrapping kind of weirdly. And from a design perspective, I think there are a bunch of ways we can make that better. I'd like you to comprehensively audit the design using, your own local testing flow. Make sure that if you add things and log things that you could see all the text and so on and so forth. For the progress page, I want an actual calendar, not just a sort of like bar chart log. I'm also finding that when you add an entry, the calorie amounts sort of overlap. Something about the threshold looks kind of weird, and now we have a bunch of text on top of other text. We should also be able to edit the history, and really what I want is I want you to be able to click on a specific calendar day and then see all of the logged items for that day. And then finally, for the settings page, when I click on meal reminders, nothing happens, so I'd also like you to comprehensively audit that. Additionally, add an onboarding screen so that when a user starts the app, it runs them through sort of what their goals are, asks them whether they like to lose weight, gain weight, maintain weight, build muscle, etc. All the standard run-of-the-mill stuff for calorie tracking apps, and then uses that to allow them to personalize their plan based off of macronutrient goals and stuff like that. Also, make sure to give them recommended plans so that they're not just having to come up with all of it themselves. Maybe have a way they can pump in like their height and their weight and stuff to work out like some calorie averages. Before you put any of those in, actually do the research because I don't just want you to pull it out of your ass. Okay, go ahead. So that's pretty comprehensive. I'm now just going to loop around and we'll see how it goes. All right, it just wrapped up here. It took 2 minutes and 56 seconds to implement this feature, much faster than anything I would have been able to do on my end. Really cool seeing all this work. You can now see we have an onboarding screen that says, what's your goal? We'll personalize your daily targets, lose weight, maintain weight, gain weight, or build muscle. So I'm going to pretend it's actually me and I'm trying to gain weight. I'll click continue. And now it's actually going to ask us, hey, use this to calculate your daily energy needs via the Mifflin-St. Jean equation. That's interesting. So male or female, I am male. Let's not talk about my age. Let's say I'm 6'2". I am seeing that like this extends a little bit to the right, unfortunately. So I'm just going to start logging things. Hey, I'm noticing that the height and foot and inches markers unfortunately extend and sort of break the page width. On mobile, it just doesn't really work. So fix that, make them a lot tighter. And then, I don't know, let's say I'm like 175. Sedentary, lightly active, moderately active, or active. I'm moderately active. I'm going to see my plan. And you can see it's now actually given me my daily energy expenditure plus my daily calorie target. So that looks pretty good. Not exactly rocket science. I can also adjust this at any point in time in settings. Let's go. So now I have, the same calorie tracking functionality I had earlier, except I can actually click in on this. And you can see the name, the calories, protein, carbs, fat, but I'm not seeing the image. And I think the image is important. We'll probably end up storing a fair amount of this, but I can imagine how, we could easily compress the image. So at least like there's a picture of something, the thing that we sent. When I click on one of the pre-existing entries, I don't see the image. This may be a bug. It may also be a storage space consideration, but ideally I want to be able to see the image that I took. We could do some compression to minimize the total amount of storage required. In fact, that's probably what makes the most sense. Okay, so I'm just going to add all of this live sort of while I'm doing the rest of the check, because that way we can bundle up and, be efficient. And here I can actually move through the various days of the month, which is really cool. Here's we can actually see like the total number of calories that I've tracked. In the calendar section, I like the little pop-up that occurs when you click on a day that has some logs, but I also like you to show progress of the day. So right now we have total number of calories, protein, carbs, and fat, but I want to show how much of that we ended up logging of the goal for that day. Okay, I'm just going to feed all of that back in, and then we'll go to settings. And now this looks pretty good. We actually have a little daily goal section with the notifications available on iOS, Android only. That's cool. So if I click this, you can see reminders at 8, 12:30, and 6:30. That's really cool. We should also be able to adjust our reminder times so that, if somebody eats breakfast a little late or something like that, they can also customize their push notifications. So I like that. That's pretty sweet. I wonder if we could also just like create more reminders in general, because some people have like snacks and some people have other things. Alternatively, we could just have like an end of day log sort of deal. Offering people some flexibility in an app is important. You don't want to offer people too much flexibility. I also don't really like the design on today's log, but that's not a big deal because I'm going to run you guys through a big like design flow later. Okay, cool. So it looks like we have a bunch of changes here. So I'm just going to click on this. And I'm not seeing any entry here, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to delete this. And I'm noticing that when I click the delete button, it doesn't actually delete. When I click the delete button on an entry, when I've full screened it, it doesn't actually delete, so fix that. And, this occurs for a variety of reasons. But I'm unsure of whether or not that's just like a simple UX thing. Yeah, it looks like it's just a UX thing. For whatever reason, when I clicked up in the top right-hand corner, it didn't show up, but when I click down there, it's fine. So now I'm just going to go and I'm going to add some more rice and chicken. Now let's do a meal analysis. And just because it's refreshing, it's sending it to the API a couple more times, so I'm just going to log it. Okay, now that I've logged it, I can actually click and I can actually see the image. So that was either a temporary problem or a problem because we kind of refactored the app, but this is what I wanted, right? I actually wanted to be able to see this. And actually, I think they compress the image automatically, which is quite nice. Notice that. So that's lovely. Okay, great. And then, over here, they're currently implementing the calorie proportion feature, so it's going to show proportionally. And then we have the ability now to customize the meal reminder time, which is kind of cool. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's very, very sweet. And the goal, as mentioned, is to be opinionated, not so opinionated that, the user feels really locked in, but pretty opinionated, so you do some of the thinking for them. And this looks pretty solid. So you can actually see like the historical tracked logs. Because there's no entries for the day, we kind of failed, right? But this day, where we actually had an entry, that worked. Cool, so I like this. I think that more or less what we've done here is great. There's just one more feature that I want to add for the core loop, and that's where I could see some situations where somebody might want to go back to maybe yesterday and then log, and I don't currently think we can, because I don't think we can change the day. There's one more feature I'd like to add. I want people to be able to go back in time and then add logs, entries to specific days. I think that's a pretty common need. Say I forgot to add stuff today, and I forgot to add stuff yesterday, and it's the morning. I want to be able to go back and add everything for the previous day. So add some way to change the day that we're currently on the today page, so that we can kind of like go back and forth. And rather than call it today, call it like dashboard or something like that, so that the user has the ability to kind of modify the date. They'll be able to do that, and then they should also be able to actually add entries on the progress page when I click in a specific day, because that might be a little bit faster for some use cases. Finally, provide the ability to delete different reminders and then customize what they're called in addition to their time. So for instance, if somebody only eats 2 meals a day, maybe only breakfast and lunch, he should be able to delete the dinner entry. Cool, looking pretty good. If I go back to Chrome here, you can see that we now have the additional functionality of being able to change the day. And at any point in time, I can click this button and jump back to today, which is really cool. So, I could go back to the 6th, I could log the exact same meal here. And you'll see that like the calorie consistency is very similar, 6, 20, 38, 52, 26. I think fat might have been 28 before, but this is actually hyper consistent. So now I can add that to my log, and you'll see I now have that same meal, that roasted chicken on the 6th. As well as today. And if I go to progress, I now have 2 logged entries, one on the 6th and one today, which is quite nice. And I can also edit this at any point in time. Maybe I want this to be 650 calories. I can save that. And now we actually have like some mild caloric differences, although mathematically this doesn't really make sense because you can't just add calories out of nowhere. Realistically, the protein, carbs, and fat changed too. Still, I want to give people the granularity and the ability to do that. Now we have our reminder set up, so I can minus out the thing, and maybe I just want breakfast and lunch, and I want lunch to occur at 2:30. That looks pretty good to me, no major issues. And let's just double check that we can actually rerun the onboarding to update my goals. Looks like we can. Just want to maintain the weight. This looks like it fixed itself, and I can actually see my plan. Let's go. And when I do that, when I rerun the onboarding, what's really important is it doesn't just jig the whole app, right? I still have the logged entries from before. It's just these logged entries have been updated with the new calorie totals. All in all, this is looking pretty good, and I'm liking where this is going. I'm still obviously going to need to run through the testing of, like the ability to take photos and stuff like that on my phone. What I want to do now is I want to significantly upgrade the design, because to me, this design is actually really stuffy, and, the dark mode apps are kind of annoying nowadays. I don't know. I like the Cal AI vibe. Now, what I'm going to do is, I don't just want to copy this mercilessly, but I really do like the way the app is laid out. I think what I'll do is I'll just start with this as like my little feature. And then I'll make adjustments to the design after this so that, the end result doesn't end up just being a carbon clone or carbon copy. What I'll say is, I love the design of the app that I just screenshotted over to you. I want you to start by emulating that design. Right now, the design is pretty weak. I'd like you to upgrade it so it more or less looks exactly like this app does, just without some minor logo things. Rather than call it Cal AI, call it Cal Tracker. After we're done modifying the design and at least like building in like a reasonable library of components, etc., I'll modify the design so that the end result looks a little different. Now I'm just going to have that go. And what's really cool is the design at the end of the day ends up being a very once you have the core functionality, all we're really doing is we're just changing the styles. We're changing the fonts a little bit. We're changing the colors in the background and stuff like that. So this part's much, much easier. And personally, I think that Claude is significantly better at doing this. You can also use like built-in libraries and tools like Claude Design in order to do that for you. Although I think in our case, it's much easier for me just to proceed manually, just prompting it and going back and forth. What I think I'm probably going to want to do is this is sort of like a black and white color scheme. I think I'm going to want to go, not black, but like kind of like dark blue gray instead. So give it sort of like a cool gray feature. I think I'm also going to modify the font. So we have some serif fonts because while I like this sans serif font, I think a serif font would be really cool. And then I like how we have these emojis, but I'm noticing these emojis are sort of all over the place color-wise. I think I'm just going to do some sort of like monochrome, dark gray, dark blue emoji. I think that's going to look really clean. This is cool. I mean, obviously, it's not identifying the specific elements in the photo like through our app, but we can scan the food. We can take a photo of the food and then we can upload it, and that's clean. I like this sort of modal or layout. The thing about app design is everything tends to be sort of rounded corners. And that's just because usually the phones that you're on have rounded corners. And, in case of an iPhone anyway, everything is sort of beveled and has that clean look. But you can also experiment with the rounded corner nature of it and the color scheme. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to make the corners significantly less round because I want to give like a higher luxe feel. And then I'm also just going to make all of the icons monochrome as well, which should look a lot easier, a lot clearer. And then I see we have a couple of additional buttons here, which we didn't have before. But, with the graphs and stuff like that, I think I'm just going to stick to like that nice, cool blue color palette. And there's like a feature here. Well, not a feature, but a little tool here called the UI Colors App Generate, which you can use to very quickly scaffold out some reasonable colors. So for instance, this is like a color skin or scale for what looks to be like a lily sort of color. What you can also do is at any point in time, you can just press spacebar and then you can customize it and change it. And so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go until this is like kind of like dark, blue-ish. Maybe I'm going to move this just a tad so that it's kind of on like the, I don't want to do like indigo, but maybe something like this. That looks pretty cool to me. And, you can actually go through this whole website, let's say, and you can see how these colors work. Although I guess you need to upgrade to Pro for that. And this isn't a pitch for this particular service or website. I think I'll just stick with cards. But once I have this now, what I can do is I can actually just like copy all of these colors. If this thing stops opening every 2 seconds, I can actually copy all these colors. Okay. And then I can paste that in and I can say, great, update color scheme so it looks like this. Also, make sure all icons, emojis are monochrome, e.g. they're of the same color as that palette. Important we stick to that palette from now on. Also apply high-end luxe style serif fonts rather than sans serif. Let's use serif fonts for the display / headings rather than sans serif, and focus on reducing the corner rounding just a tad to make it feel higher end. Okay, now for anybody that doesn't know, a serif font is just a font that is sort of like a little old-timey. Like this is a sans serif font. This is sort of a new font. But a serif font, if I just exit out of this, is just a little twang, essentially. You see how this S, sans serif, would have just been, something that looked kind of like this. Well, a sans serif is a serif is one that sort of has like these little things at the ends. And so, design has sort of gone back and forth between serif and sans serif a bunch of times, but I like the idea of sort of a serif font for headings, just because I think it makes the app look kind of unique. Okay, so anyway, they've opened this up now, and this is sort of our cal tracker. And you can see here the design is still lacking. It's not exactly what we wanted, but we're going to continue modifying this until it gets higher and higher end. But I am liking what's going on here. We sort of have these little charts that are popping up. Okay, so it's looking a lot cleaner. And you can actually see the little calendar view on the main window now, not just on the progress page. Now we're going to modify all of the colors and stuff so that it looks a lot cleaner. And what I like about this is, notice how we can actually see the entire header here, and it only gets truncated when we mouse over it here. What I'd like is I'd actually like this to spill over. I like that we can actually see roasted chicken thigh with dirty rice. I think I'm probably going to modify the prompt a little bit as well so that like the outputted titles are shorter. Modify the prompt of the AI so that the outputted food titles are shorter, and then fix the truncation so that instead it wraps. Make sure the design looks really nice on the wrap too, so that, if we have a longer title, it still fits within the bounds of the card and nothing is cut off or looks weird. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm really liking that now. And then if I go to profile, how does that look? It looks like we've lost some of the, outlines or headings or cards or something like that, because as we see here, these aren't really nicely aligned anymore. So I think it's probably just changed the colors a little bit without fully having screenshotted all the pages on the app and sort of like gone through that feature on its end. So I'm just going to make a couple of additional minor style modifications and so on and so forth, and then I'll circle back when it's all ready. Well, it's definitely looking different. Maybe these serif fonts aren't actually a good idea, or maybe it's just the specific font that I'm using, because that looks kind of lame to me. I don't know. It doesn't look as high-end as I was initially planning. And that's okay. We can change the design anytime we want. But notice how now the background has this kind of cool gray to it. The home is still kind of compressed, I would say, up top. I don't really like how compressed it is. I'm also noticing there's just different types of design. Do you notice how here there's no outline, but then over here there's an outline? What we need to do is we just need to fully, I want to say, harmonize the design. I'm noticing that there are slightly different types of designs on each different page. For instance, the home page has an outline around each card, whereas the profile page doesn't have an outline around each card. I want you to remove outlines around all cards and favor clean, minimalistic design over busy design. Also noticing that the home page is very compressed and kind of stacked up top. I'd like you to distribute each of the elements a little bit more organically so that it doesn't look super stacked. And then instead of using a serif font like I talked about before, just pick a really good common sans serif font, one that is typically associated with high-end clean designs. Everything else looks pretty clean as it stands. I also like the monochrome emojis and icons. This is just probably the major low-hanging fruit here. Now on the entry page, I'm noticing that some of the text is overwritten by the div. So just make sure that when you do a test, you actually run through every single page, take a screenshot of it, and itemize anything that may be suboptimal or below par before modifying it on your own to make sure that it's as clean as possible. Also, I don't like the green button that is next to the meal reminders toggle. That looks kind of weird right now. So rather than making it green, make it align with the rest of the color palette. And in general, just go through one final time and ensure everything aligns with the color palette I asked for. Okay, we'll go back here and continuously loop back until we get a really nice design. Looks significantly better. I want you now to go through the design page by page and then itemize and enumerate a list of all possible improvements you can make to make it higher end, sleeker, and more luxe. Self-loop as many times as you need to implement all of that design functionality, because it's still looking just a little tight and rough around the edges. Also, add way cleaner icons for the home, the progress, and the profile tabs down at the bottom. Those are pretty low end right now. Also, add some daily weight tracker chart that you could see over time, like Cal AI. Continuing to modify the design, but we're getting pretty close. This is now looking really clean. I like the profile page. Notice how these divs are now really nicely laid out. Color scheme makes perfect sense. This is like a dark blue instead of a pure black. We still have a weird green toggle here, but I'll fix that up. Progress is also looking really clean. You can see how now all of the colors sort of reflect this monochrome look. And this page here, despite that being kind of a compressed image, just looks really nice. We don't have any like weird text that's laid out and so on and so forth. We can also remove entries really easily just by giving these buttons quick clicks. And the actual like UX, when I click this button, is nice as well. So you can see we now can modify the protein, carbs, and fats, and the calories are sort of up here instead. We have the ability to fix our results by basically just rerunning, saying, hey, something is wrong here. Once we're done, we get a nice, beautiful little animation. If I go back to the home page here, I'd say this is probably the biggest issue because it's also the first place that users will see. This is looking a little crammed, and then I don't like how small these are right now, but I do like how we've now modified the colors and we have cute little icons. So all of this stuff is just, a couple of prompts away, as you guys could see, not that big of a deal. This little plus button here can add a meal. I think realistically, we should also have the ability to track weight. So I actually asked it, hey, can you add a weight tracking feature? So what I think we'll do after that is probably add like a weight graph right over here that is some sort of like line chart so that you could see your weight go up or go down over time. Because we're modifying it right now on like the design level, the database and stuff like that is really easy to change because it's all local. if we were to try and make all these modifications after we had like an actual live database, every time we do this, we have to push to like a new schema inside of Supabase, which just take a lot of time, energy, and then also consistently deprecate any old data. So we'd also have to add like a big chunk to our testing loop. So that's kind of annoying, not a fan. I'm seeing that this still isn't really getting fixed though. Notice how this just modified it and kind of pushed it into the middle. I feel like it's probably fundamentally misunderstanding something. So we should do some sort of screenshot testing loop here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have it open it up in Chrome DevTools instead, and then just test it all end to end. That way it can go through this cycle autonomously and then fix the, the fact that these cards aren't fully laid out. But right before that, I'm just going to take a screenshot and I'll say, make the protein eaten, carbs eaten, and fat eaten section, let's say circles, much larger, so that we don't have weird spacing. Right now, it's not left or right aligned. Should be proportional to the page so that the padding etc is fixed left and right side. Cool. And, at this point, I'm really just dumping in changes as time goes on. It's very simple and straightforward for me. And I do a new change usually while it's still implementing the old change because those changes tend to be pretty separated. So now, for instance, I see this plus button. It doesn't have ability to log weight. I'll say add weight log feature to the plus button so that when somebody clicks the plus button, it's in there. This is looking better for sure, but we're still a little bit off. I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'll say, great, now open up in your own Chrome window and screenshot through the app, enumerate all of the minor incongruencies in design, so like spacing, margins, alignment on left and right sides, etc., and then fix each in turn, e.g. the calories eaten, and then macronutrients section is still out of alignment. Want this fixed on a, mobile response, in a mobile responsive way. Cool. From here on out, we can log the food, we can log the weight. That looks nice. What happens when okay, and you can see we're actually going through this whole process, which is very nice. You can see it's now modifying this actually on its own. So I'm just going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to have another window open over here, okay, which is kind of my own. And I'm just going to, do what I'm doing on the left-hand side here while it does what it's doing on the right-hand side. So I don't know, maybe I want to gain weight, have the ability to enter all this information in. Looks pretty clean, see my plan. And then over here we have, the three sort of calorie and protein, carbs, and fat recommendations. That looks pretty cool. And then what happens when I log weight now? Looks like the weight log is an issue. So when I click weight log, we can see that this clearly extends a little bit too much over to the right-hand side. And I imagine that's because this width is just fixed, which is an issue. So we'll go back over here and I'll say some issue with the weight log feature right now. When I click the button, the field spills all the way over to the right-hand side. It doesn't really look responsive or dynamic. Okay, cool. And it's just actually going through and, testing and so on and so forth this page right now, which is kind of clean. But anyway, let me actually test that functionality. We'll say 175 and I'll save. And then we need to log at least 2 weigh-ins to see my trend. So could I log 176 now? And then we could kind of see this change over time. No, it doesn't look like it. I think we're going to need to actually log 2 in 2 separate days. So obviously we're going to need the ability to log the weight on a different day as well. I think probably what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add the recently uploaded or recently logged, and then have this be both a combination of food and weight. For the recently uploaded section on today, make it so that it's recently logged instead of recently uploaded, and that we have the ability to log, or rather it has the ability to list both meals and also weight. The idea is right now we should be able to log directly from the homepage. Instead, the ability to log weight is buried in the progress page and stuff like that. There's really no need to make this overly complex. Just have the ability to log weight with the plus button and then have all of that appear under recently uploaded. Also, we should be able to change the date that we're logging weights because we, again, may want to historically log our weight a couple days ago or something like that. And while we did that, you can see it actually fixed these little macro circles, and this is now looking a lot cleaner. I'd go as far as saying like this is now, about as good as you can realistically get. I think there's some minor issues like when you kind of scale back here, and this text is still kind of, very, very, what's the term? The tracking is very tight. That just means like there's very little space between each element. I'm also noticing that this card doesn't fully spill over, which is unfortunate, just given the fact this is now on 3 lines or so. I think ideally what we'd want is we'd want the calories and then the macros to be right next to it in a case like this, because then we'd actually be able to make the card smaller. But at the same time, it is clearly trying to respect the fact that I said, hey, I want you to like spill over the line as opposed to go all the way out. So I think what we'll probably have to do here is we'll probably need to, on really tiny displays, just like really compress the hell out of everything. On really tiny displays, we should find a way to showcase all of the information, aka calories, protein, carbs, and fat, under the recently logged section, such that the card doesn't get super tall. Right now, we're spilling over onto 4 lines like the following, which is very suboptimal and inefficient. Instead, if we're on a very small display, I want you to come up with a way to showcase all that information on 2 lines max. And that includes both the title and also the, actual like calorie info. Okay. And I'm realizing here, I just did that by accident. So now I'm filling that in. Notice how long this is, for instance, and how ugly that card is. If I click this button, can I log the weight? Okay. And I see it actually goes today, May 6th. So one more feature I'm going to do is if I'm on the let's say May 6th day, and I click the plus button, the weight log should immediately jump to the May 6th day. It shouldn't default to today. It should basically default to whatever day the home page is currently on. Okay, that looks pretty clean as well. And then over here, we do have that truncation. And I guess that's sort of the way that it came up with things. I'm wondering if there's a way just to get like the calories down below as well. I don't want any truncation. Maybe you can truncate a little bit longer, sorry. Okay, let me make sure I 100% know what I'm about to say before I try and direct this AI, because at the end of the day, I'm spending tokens and whatnot. So what exactly do I want? Well, I want this title, okay, can be a little bit longer, but I basically want this calorie line to be down here, and then I want all of these compressed. You can truncate the text, but do so significantly wider. And then combine the calorie and then macronutrient lines using a smart combination of abbreviations, compressed text, smaller text, etc. Do whatever you need to in order to ensure that you could see maybe double the current number of characters on that top line. And then I'm noticing now that we have the ability to log weight in addition to log food, the little profile pics and images are slightly off. They're not perfectly aligned. So I think the padding on those cards or the spacing is different. I'd like you to realign the logged calorie entries so that they perfectly match the size, width, and then layout of the weight log entries. Cool, stick that in as well. And yeah, the rest of the stuff looks pretty clean. Okay, now this is correctly identifying sort of May 6th. If I go back to progress, you see now we actually have a chart, which is nice. So why don't I go back here to May 4th, log the weight, and just pretend that I was significantly skinnier. Let's go back to progress, and now you can actually see this is rising over time, which is quite nice. We can zoom out to 3 month, 6 month all. Presumably, we can't see that right now because we only do have 3 weight entries. I think the last thing we need is we just need some sort of x-axis. We need some sort of x-axis to the graph for weight log right now because we don't currently have that. Oh, and one more thing. Under profile, the meal reminders button is still green. The meal reminders button under profile, the little toggle, is still green. Just make it a shade of blue, similar to the rest of our color palette. Cool, this looks way cleaner, as you can see over here. And if we go under progress, you can see we actually now have the dates logged. Although this is with serif font, so I'm going to make one minor change. The x-axis is with serif fonts. I want sans serif. Okay, and now we have the finished design of the 3 pages, the home, the progress, and the profile. As you guys can see, this is now populating, as I go through each of these. We have everything nicely aligned. We, unfortunately, were unable to fix the truncation. Like, to me, this is still just a little bit too close. But I looked at the aspect ratio and then also the total number of pixels, and most phones will be somewhere like this between the two. So we should be able to see the protein, the calories, and the fat down there. If you go down to the progress page, we obviously now have the weight progress and everything's really clean on that end. And then we also can, X out or jump directly into different logged entries and stuff like that. Then we have a much nicer kind of looking flow, I would say, alongside the breakfast and lunch reminders. So this looks pretty good. I mean, I'm probably not going to want to include the Anthropic API key in the final product. If you think about it, like It's kind of like my job is like the app dev. Your requests are passed through my Anthropic API key. I pay for the usage, and then I just charge you a monthly subscription with like enough margin to make me some delta. But I'll just leave that in for now, just to kind of keep the app customizable and see where we go from there. And then finally, that plus button I think is really clean. So now that we've tested all this stuff locally, and I've verified the design is how I like, we can actually push through and do that next step. Which, if we go back over here to this big Excalibur, okay, is all the way over here now, which means we just tested it with our computer. Now we have to test it with the phone mirror, and then finally I'm going to do a phone reel. This is obviously pretty intensive, and I don't want you guys to sit around just watching me do a bunch of testing and minor edits. I think the design part was instructive, but from here on out, I'm just going to test it on the iPhone mirroring app on my end, then I'll circle back with any adjustments or problems that I had. Okay, just wanted to show you guys, it is so clean. It's basically exactly what I wanted, and I just tested this with my phone, and the haptic feedback and all of like the little interactions were really, really nice. But the layout on this is just absolutely gorgeous. I think this is probably one of the nicer apps that I put together in a pretty short period of time. I am noticing some minor asynchronies, like, for instance, incongruencies, where the left-hand most aligned part of the height and the weight and stuff like that are not aligned with the text underneath. These are minor changes that I'll do that I just couldn't see until I was actually on my phone. But this is really clean. It has more or less the exact functionality that I want. What's really cool is unfortunately, I don't know if I could show you guys the camera feature, but the camera feature is really cool. The UX and stuff like that is, because I'm using the iPhone mirroring app. I think this is going to bug out. Yeah, so I'm unfortunately not able to show you guys, but very cool. And you can take a photo of your food, and when you do so, it has the exact same UX as what we saw with the Chrome version of uploading a photo. Stuff like this and this minor UX change is just so awesome to see as somebody that put something together like this in 15 or 20 minutes. Cool. So now that I'm done with all of this, we sort of have to do that next step, which is add a database. And then after we're done the database, we'll have to run another test, then a security audit, and then finally another test before deploying. The database is going to be pretty simple. Same idea as what we had before. We're just going to set up auth on Supabase, and then I'm going to set up the whole DB stuff on my end, give it the keys, and then it'll run away, implement everything. Now, first, before I go any further, I will say the number of tokens that I'm using in the bottom right-hand corner is getting pretty long. And it depends on what model you're using, but typically, after like 200,000 or so tokens, the performance of the model tends to decrease significantly, and your ability to make minor kind of granular changes goes down. And so generally, my rule of thumb is like, if I'm at like the 250 to maybe like 300,000 mark, I'll usually perform what's called a compaction before going any further. And that compaction is pretty easy. You just go /compact. What occurs is it gets all of the history in your whole conversation, and then it just like compresses it. Instead of using words like fixed, the app now explicitly requests camera or photo library permissions. It might go fixed. App asks for camera/photo perms before launching picker. And notice how like this still has all the same information as this. It's just, 50% as long, maybe 60% as long. So we get to save that 40% and basically bankroll that, and that improves the performance of, Claude on the next iteration, which is quite handy. The downside of this is it takes a fair amount of time. So while it's doing that, I'm going to go and set up Supabase. Same idea as what we were doing before. I'm just going to go start a project, and then, we have Habit Tracker app over here. I should be able to start a new one, I believe. Yeah, looks like I can. For project name, I'm going to call this Cal Tracker. Then I'm just going to use whatever the default password is here. And I'm just going to copy that over. Let's use strong password copy. And then remember to enable automatic RLS anytime you're doing this, because that's just one of the lowest hanging fruit security upgrades. This wasn't actually here before. You had to do a bunch of backend coding stuff in order to get it up and running, but so many Vibe coded apps had gotten totally leaked that they just decided to add that. And honestly, I think they should just make it a mandatory thing. There are a few instances where you can't really do that, but yeah, I think like they should just default to that, and then RLS should be like opt out, not opt in. All right, and the end result is super clean. We now have this working functionally on both our database and then also our local. So if I go to profile here and then sign out, you see we now have a pretty clean login page. I won't say this is perfect, but basically I went on this website here, Dribble, and then I found a couple of sign-in pages that I liked. And then I just fed one in particular, this one, into Claude saying, hey, can you build me something kind of like this for my sign-in page? And the end result is, this. We got these cute little calories and weights and stuff like that going up and down, and it's nice. And I already have an account, so when I sign in, we just jump directly into the app. And there are a couple of issues I've noticed, like the onboarding flickers very briefly. I'm going to fix all that right now with Claude, and that's actually what it's doing in the background. It's fixing some of the minor usability issues now that we have a database. For instance, if I reload this page, you notice that it takes a second for this thing to toggle, and that's because it's actually pulling that directly from the database. So I don't want that to take a second. I just want it to be cached. So I'm going to go through now and just implement some additional app functionality like you guys have already seen me do. Now, what I have it doing is I'm having it loop over repeatedly and then open up every individual page in the app. Just fairly easy to do. You basically just say, hey, I want you to open up every individual page of the app, and then ideate small improvements that it could make to the usability, and then the speed by which the app loads and then works. This is sort of a meta system where the AI is now doing both the ideation and the implementation for me. Then I basically just take a quick peek at everything after all is said and done and verify whether or not it's good. And as you can see, it's now adding styles for water and weekly cards and stuff like that too. This is a form of accessory functionality, right? Like save as favorite is not something that I necessarily need the app to have, but I want to polish it up before I actually end up submitting this to the App Store. So I want this to have more or less everything that I think an app would realistically need to be on par with or on the same level as Cal AI. And it's all just a byproduct of token usage, right? I have this running relatively autonomously right now. It's been 24,000 tokens spent for almost 6 minutes. If you can budget that level of token spend, you can basically trade your money for tokens for time, and then get that time back to do whatever else you're doing. Now, while I was using this on my phone, I found that it was taking a little while longer than I wanted it to. I noticed that every time I log something, it would take like a good 700 milliseconds to maybe a second in order for that log to go through. And that was just annoying to me. I don't want this to take a very long time. I understand that you should know that any calorie tracking or whatever that I'm doing on my Chrome is always going to occur faster than on my mobile, simply because I have way more processing resources on hand on my computer than I do on my phone. So generally, whatever it feels like on your computer, it's going to feel twice as worse on your phone. And when I moved over to my phone, I found that. So what I did is, in addition to asking it to assist me with design and so on and so forth, okay, right over here at the very top, I also asked it, hey, and it looks like it just knocked that out, which is unfortunate. Hey, what sorts of changes are currently contributing to the very long load times? And you can see that it looks like most of these now are significantly faster. So this one here, for instance, went from 417 to 399. This one from 393 to 389. But it looks like, ultimately speaking, we had some improvements. I think because we're doing a single call to the database or something like that, it's going to save something like 600 milliseconds on cellular. And then I also had to do a little full reload test to see how fast all this stuff is. So how much faster is home now that we've done the improvement? It looks like we're getting it down from 355 to 221 or something like that. Yeah, average time of 254 down to 219 milliseconds. So we basically made the entire app a good 14% faster. And then it's suggesting that on, some form of LTE or something like that, we went from 560 milliseconds, which is about half a second of pure network latency. That's kind of what I was feeling before, to about 80 milliseconds of network latency, which is about half a second saved. So, that's really more or less what you need to do. If you really want it to work super snappy on your phone, you need to trade even more tokens in order for some optimizations like this. But the issue is, because I've now kind of made a couple of changes to the core thing while I was testing on my phone, I have to go back and I have to test it all over again. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to roll it back. I'm going to test it fully end to end on Chrome, and then I'm going to do iPhone mirroring, and then I'm going to do my phone. It is annoying to have to do this over and over and over again, but there's just no other way to fully know. My goal is, I want this thing to be basically publishable ready at the end of my bout. I don't want to have to send this off to some QA team or anything like that. I'm doing it all myself with Claude. So I'm just going to give it another maybe 10 or 15 minute test, and then I'll let you guys know where I'm at. Okay, and I just tested this end to end. It's looking really clean, but there was one tiny thing that wasn't working, which is the bar at the very top of the page, which is now black, was white. What I mean by that is those little icons, like my time, my battery, my Wi-Fi signal, and my cell signal, those just blended into the background. And it's one of those things that you just can't know until you do the full end-to-end test and actually run through everything on your phone. So now that I've fixed this, just by saying, hey, my iPhone's native top bar icons are white, all this stuff, is there any way to fix? How do I force the colors? without me having done so, I never would have actually got to this point. That would have been like a serious, clear usability problem. Now that it's fixed, though, it's really clean, and you can see that the camera's in use, and everything is basically actually totally functional now, which is quite awesome. Also, because I don't have a giant plate of steaming rice in front of me, what I did is I took a photo of my screen with all of that on, and just confirming that still managed to work. Although I did, for some reason, get slightly lower fat ratings and more protein. So, yeah, it's a hell of a deal. Eh? If you want more protein in your diet, just take a photo of food on your screen instead of in real life. Okay, so with all that said, we now have done more or less everything that we need to do to actually push our app live, except for probably the most boring thing, which is the security audit. The good news is the security audit, as I've shown you guys with the previous app build, is very simple and it's very straightforward. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by clearing all of my conversation history. So I'll go /clear. Okay, and so now we're basically starting a new conversation, which is why the tokens are down to 0%. I'm then going to go back to my app or my Chrome, and then I'm going to go and search up security for vibe coded apps, okay, which is the asset that I've given people in previous courses that basically runs through this big security audit. And just like I did last time, I'm just going to copy this puppy, paste it in, and I'm making sure it's a new prompt. Okay, I'm just going to have it go end to end, analyze everything in this repo, and then give me those changes. And I'm not going to have you guys be on the end of the line for this because, again, I feel like you probably understand the point. Just AI running through everything in a very comprehensive sort of line-by-line security basis. And it just ran through a final security check as well as a general sort of functional QA audit. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do that 3-test sequence starting on my computer, then iPhone mirroring, and then finally Expo on my phone. And that's that. Now that we've done everything involved in creating an app that has AI functionality, why don't we wrap this up with a third app? This one's sort of going to be a mixture between the habit tracker and then the AI tracker. Very simple and straightforward Pomodoro or time tracking app that I'm going to implement some cool design stuff in. In short, we're going to have something that grows as our time tracker goes up and up. And I also want you to know you don't just have to do a tracker. I've done 3 versions of trackers now, a habit one, a calorie one, and then also a time one. But trackers just happen to be one of the easiest and simplest ways for me to show you guys how all this stuff works under the hood. With all that said, let's get into it. All right, so my next app is going to be a Pomodoro app. For those of you guys that don't know, there's this whole idea of Pomodoros for productivity. And a Pomodoro is just a 20 to 25 minute uninterrupted work block where you just sit down and get things done. And the idea is this is how you train your focus and your ability to remain productive over long periods of time. You do a 20-minute period, you take a 5-minute break, you do another 20-minute period, and so on. The next week, you do a 25-minute period and then a 5-minute break, and then another 25-minute period. And, you eventually just build that up. So I'm just going to call this a Pomodoro app, okay? And just like we went through the whole app design framework for the Cal AI lookalike here, I'm going to go through the whole app design framework for the Pomodoro. So I'm just going to copy that over. Okay, kind of stick it right over here. Maybe move that up so that it doesn't kind of get in the way. And then, just like the one thing for calorie tracker app was the calorie tracking. The one thing for the Pomodoro app, just logically speaking, and let me just copy this to make my life easier, is going to be timers. And it'll be like adjustable timer. And so you'll be able to set, like a 20 or 25 or 30-minute timer and increase maybe the length of that over time. Okay, the core loop, because the app is so simple, we're going to need something cool to kind of keep people coming back. And so the core loop in this case is going to be you set the timer. I think we're going to start with planting a tree, and then you watch it grow, and then it like dings when you're done, and then it looks awesome. The whole idea here is because the actual app is so simple, we're going to add like a tremendous amount of visual polish and appeal and kind of add like some cute interactivity that, despite not actually being like a feature, is just going to keep people actually like on the app. And the whole idea is like you're going to take your phone, you're going to put it kind of on your desk, you're going to click the thing, and something is slowly going to grow, let's say, as you go through that Pomodoro. And we see this a lot with apps nowadays. They like the idea of you growing and taking care of something. It's kind of cool. You plant a tree and so on. In terms of accessory features, we'll definitely need a few. So I want the ability to like map Pomodoro or maybe log Pomodoro. Track progress. Let's do that. So you can see your Pomodoros, basically have like a log of them and so on and so forth, similar to what we had previously. And then you should also have the ability to, like change the thing you're growing. And maybe like earn levels and colors and etc. Some sort of award for growing your tree longer than other people. In terms of the surface area, I don't think we're really going to have much more than just like the growth screen and then maybe like I don't know, maybe like progress or tracking or log or something like that. Maybe just growth and then log. I think that seems pretty cool. And then the retention hook is just going to be you getting checked in with. So maybe like daily check-ins about your productivity and your performance. Hey, if you want to keep growing that tree, then circle back. You haven't logged a thing in a certain amount of time. Because that seems pretty simple. And then I'm actually just going to walk through this whole thing left to right. I didn't do a very good job of that the last time. So I'm actually going to walk through this whole thing left to right with you guys and kind of check everything off as we go. All right, so what does that mean? That means that we have now kind of finished our MVP ideation, and so we sort of have the MVP all laid out. All we have to do now, logically, is we have to actually give that to Claude. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to my anti-gravity instance where I was setting up Google Play developer and then console registration and then some other stuff for the CalTracker app because I wanted to submit that to the App Store. Then I'm just going to go up to the top here, go New Window. Now I can just open up another window. Then here, I'm going to call this Pomodoro app. Okay, and then I'm going to open, and now we're inside of the Pomodoro app. That's why it says so in the top left-hand corner. And just double tapping on this, opening up my little Claude window. It's kind of annoying how many steps you have to do. You could also open it down here, but I just think this is faster. And then once we're here, now I can just say I want to create a mobile app using React Native and Expo. Set up the workspace for me, assuming I intend to launch both Android and iOS versions. Okay, so now we're just going to have this run through the setup, just like we did the other couple times, build out our little scaffold, and then once we have the scaffold, I'll actually add all of the functionality needed. I'm building an app with a 5-step framework of core function, core loop, accessory features, surface area check, and then retention hook. The app that I'm looking to build is essentially a Pomodoro-style time tracker. The core function will be the ability to track time and then adjust the time that you are tracking. The whole idea being this app will help improve your focus. Now the loop is going to be highly visual based. What I'd like a function where when you start a Pomodoro, you're basically planting a seed. And then over the course of the Pomodoro, the seed grows into a full tree. This needs to be very visually stimulating, look kind of cute, and be in a particular visual style. I kind of want this to look almost like an anime, like an animated sort of TV show. When it's done, I want the phone to sort of vibrate, so I want like haptic feedback. I also want, a bunch of visual stimulatory kind of functionality. For accessory features, I want the ability to track our progress as sort of like a log. Basically, as the user does more and more and more Pomodoros and then gets more focused, I want the progress bar to show them improving in both their times and so on and so forth. I also want the trees or seeds or whatever feature we end up on to change. So I want like different colors. I want the trees to change in nature, maybe progress through like a different series of trees. I want you to earn levels and colors and stuff like that. For a surface area check, I really only think we need 2 main screens, maybe a growth screen, which is where you plant the seed and then it grows and, begin the Pomodoro session. And then some sort of log where you can see progress over time. I don't think it needs to be more complicated than that. And then the retention hook, the thing that's going to keep them coming back is going to be a daily check-in, where if you don't come back, let's say, in a 72-hour period, then your trees start withering and dying. And maybe you plant 1 tree for every Pomodoro session, and the whole idea is you'll eventually build a forest. Okay, so I just did that while this was building. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to press enter here. And, I'm just going to have this thing run through the build full end to end. Now, what this is doing, which is a little bit different this session than the previous ones, is actually going through and planning and then also exploring the project state and then researching some animation libraries. And it's doing so using what's called their subagent teams feature. And you can see that actually just exited. But basically, we have like a main thread, which is what I'm running right now. And then we have another subagent that's operating alongside us. And this one is researching React Native animation libraries. Now, every time this finishes, it'll collapse back to the main thread. And then, just give as much context as humanly possible to the main agent that's sort of listening to us. Now, in addition, you can see we've also switched over to plan mode, which is a little bit different from, the other sort of one-shot modes that we've operated at before. And Claude will do this from time to time. They'll typically use plan mode when it needs a little bit more information from you and it intends to ask you some questions. And so you guys can see here, it's asking me some questions. So it's saying, for the tree growth animation, should the tree grow in real time as the counter counts down, e.g. at 50% time, 50% grown, or should it be a pre-made animation that plays on completion? Now, we want real-time growth for sure. For data persistence, session history, forest state levels, which approach should you prefer? I want local SQLite. That just means doing it all locally on my computer for now. What default Pomodoro duration do you want? And should users be able to customize it? We'll do 25 minutes. And then we can actually submit all these. And you'll see most of the time it'll actually just like recommend an option. And in this case, all of these recommendations are what I initially wanted. But, Claude wanted to make 100% sure that if I wanted something else, we could get it done now, as opposed to later after we're done with all the token usage. Okay, so now it's going to actually go through, building this SVG that grows. SVG is like sort of a design, and we'll see how it looks. I don't actually have high hopes for the design functionality yet. I think we'll probably have to go pretty in depth there, but if it could one-shot it, that'd be fantastic and very much preferable. Cool, and it's already opened up the little app here. I had it use Chrome DevTools MCP, which is a tool that allows it to take screenshots of things as it does the building, and that's what's going on right now. You can see it's stuck on the loading page, so it's just going to fix that sort of while I'm explaining the way that this app works to you guys. And so we have two pages. We have a grow page, and then we have a forest page. And I actually like this. I think this is split up a lot better than what I was considering previously. The grow page is obviously going to be where you log a session, and then it's going to grow. And then the forest page is presumably just going to be a big list of all of the things that you've, all the trees that you've sort of grown before. Now, it's very simple. This is not like a high quality sort of SVG animation, at least as it stands. You can see this is sort of off to the left and so on and so forth. So we're just going to make a couple changes to the app, make it all small, and then, can kind of continue working our way through this until we get it to a point where it like works. Then once we've got it to the point where it works, I'm going to check that little built box and then move on to optimizing the design. All right, so just taking a look at the app, we have an onboarding screen here. I'm just going to make this kind of mobile-y. This onboarding screen says plant a seed. You can see there's some sort of issue with this chart. After you plant the seed, you'll grow your tree. You'll kind of earn XP to unlock new species, and then you'll tend to your forest, and your forest will look kind of like that. So this does look really neat. It's super cute. I like this. A couple of issues here already. One of the issues is, this is obviously not big enough to encapsulate the content. Or it may be that I'm just a little too zoomed in. But regardless, like these things should not just be on one line. We should obviously have that spillover, right? And then I don't much like the layout of this app as it stands anyway. So, I mean, if I go here and then make this a little taller so I can plant the seed, you can see that we planted the seed. The issue is I can't really see this grow, right? So that kind of sucks. I'm just going to give up. Go back to the forest page. You can see we have the sessions, number of hours that we've logged, streak, level 1, unlocked, oak. This is cool. This is exactly what I wanted. A certain number of trees in your forest, then recent sessions. So what we're going to have to do, like just to really test the UX and stuff like that, is we're going to just need to add a bunch of entries to the database. So I'll say, add a bunch of entries to the database that I could see what this app would look like if it was fully populated. We'll need to do this if we are in to adjust the design and so on and so forth. Anyway, this still looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the way that is. I'm just going to go back to this Excalidraw and I think meaningfully mark off this build because this has most of the functionality that I wanted. From here on out, it's just going to be sort of a design loop like we did last time, slowly and consistently upgrading the design until we eventually get to a point where, we love the way the app looks. I'm also just going to start voice dumping all of these minor changes just directly into Claude as it continues to build. And you can see it's already started adding stuff to the database. We're at a certain level. If I go back to my forest here, you see, okay, it actually doesn't look like we have all of this in yet, but we do have the sessions, which is nice, and the EXP. So that's wonderful. I think this looks pretty solid right now. Forest is looking cool too. My main issue is on the grow page, the timer options of 15, 25, 45, and 60 minutes are not currently responsive. Additionally, the way the page is vertically laid out is there's a tremendous amount of space up at the top that is empty until the tree grows. This makes the app look kind of ugly and weird until the tree actually goes through that growth animation. And I don't want to have to scroll. I ideally just want everything visible. So we need to find a way to make this app much more responsive for all different types of devices and then solve that as well. Also, because of the lack of responsiveness, the forests are currently cut off. E.g., you can't actually see the tops of all of those trees on the homepage. Additionally, I just like us to make the homepage significantly more visually engaging. Use best practices for mobile apps. Right now, we only have the level marker, we have the little fire marker, and then we have the time, and then obviously the timer. But I think we'll need to significantly upgrade this both from a design perspective, but also like a font choice perspective, also like a usability perspective, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I do like this. I also like the trees withering aspect. So I think this is the trees that are withering. That's probably what those are. Although it says 2 trees and I'm seeing 3, so there may be an issue with that database there. But yeah, this is pretty cute. Ideally, what I'd like to do is I'd like to significantly upgrade the design of all these trees because, as it stands right now, it's just a couple of circles. I think we could do so by maybe grabbing these assets from somewhere else instead of just making them ourselves. That'd be nice. And then I think we should be able to click into the recent sessions too. Add functionality so we can click into a recent session. Right now, the recent sessions are sort of a log, and that log is fine, but we actually want to be able to click in on them and see. Also, add a graph of some kind underneath the forest section under forest, on the forest page, sorry, so that we could see that. Also, right now, I'm seeing a notification that says 2 trees withering, but the actual visuals make it look like 3 trees are withering. We should identify the withered trees a little bit better so users can see what's going on. And you should be able to interact with each of these things. Like, aka, you should be able to maybe tap or nudge on the trees to make something happen. In addition, these trees should be animated. Right now, they're not really animated. It's just a static tree. And despite how cute that is, the user's definitely going to want it to be a lot more engaging than that. We also need a way to see what happens when we actually make it to the end of a Pomodoro. Right now, I'm just looking at this app on a static basis. I don't actually know what the tree looks like as it grows. So ideally, we'd want a way to trigger all of the animation states that I could take a look and then maybe help you modify them more granularly. And then I also want a way just to be able to trigger it finished. Dumping all that stuff in while it's continuing making other changes. You could see it's now adjusting the little EXP bar at the top. That's cool. And then it's also changing the vertical spacing. It's making the forest sort of like fixed, which is nice, but obviously we are still cutting off that top. I think I'm actually just going to like significantly change this design. As much as I like the way that it's laid out, I don't really like the colors, and I think we're going to have to like really change the fonts in order to make this nice. So why don't I go over to our lovely friend Dribble here, and then why don't we see, I don't know, tracker app? We do that. So like a time tracker app or something like that. Anyway, I like this. This looks really cool. I'm not seeing a time tracker app specifically. Some of these are all right. Oh, this one literally says Pomodoro. That's kind of cute. We might be able to make some use of that. Yeah, these are time tracker apps for sure. Just zooming in here. I like this. I like this design. Good mood, new day, fresh start. How well did you sleep today? It's kind of a sleep tracker, but do you notice how it's got this nice sort of warm color scheme to it? And then also we have these little graphs. I think this would be great from a graph perspective. This is the Pomodoro tracker, which is really interesting. I think this is probably a little too much. What's the next page look like? Okay, it's just a mock-up, hey? How about this one? Okay, we actually have the time tracker, tracking history, ongoing projects. No, I think this is probably like the best little design that I've seen so far. So let me just take a look at a couple other ones. Maybe just tracker app instead of time tracker app. That should at least show us more. Moody area, that looks pretty cute. I like that. Just taking a look at all the possible options here. I want it to be fun and sort of like, I don't know, like youthful, like kid-like almost. I like this. This is very cute too. You see with the sort of outlines here, that's super cute. Although I'm realizing this has more to do with the pictures than it has to do with anything else. What we could also do is we could have GPT image generate a couple of designs for an app like this and then feed in those designs to Claude and have it try and reproduce and recreate it. That might be not a bad idea. Why don't I try that? So I'm just going to use a /BTW feature here to allow me to ask Claude questions about this app while it works. So I'll say, describe this app in a prompt feeding into an image generator so it can come up with an in-depth design, set of designs. Let's try that. Now, GPT Image 2 is one of the better AI image generators right now. So this can actually generate total like mock-ups for mobile apps and stuff. And the idea is we're going to take this mock-up idea, feed it to GPT-2 image or image 2. And then once it has this, we should be good. Okay, so I now just fed all of this into GPT image and we'll see how it does. Awesome, we now have these designs and these look a lot cleaner. And this is more or less what I wanted. I wanted something that had, fantastic textures. I love how it's actually somewhat similar to our app right now, actually, with a little field and stuff. I want to see this thing grow, right? I think that's really important to me. This is the forest with a bunch of information. And you can see it's actually kind of mimicked the structure and layout which is telling me that really the thing that we're lacking is just like the visual assets right now. The actual forest bit looks good. I think it's generated multiple of these. Okay, yes, it has generated multiple of these. This is really the main screen I think that we need to focus on, and then we could see it sort of grow in the background here too. I am curious how we're actually going to implement something like that, because obviously we're going to need to design like really high quality assets. I think what we could probably do is we could just generate each of these trees in a sequence and then maybe extract them, and then add some sort of animation where like the little things sort of move around and the leaves rustle and so on and so forth. Oh, and this is going to be the onboarding screen, which I think is going to look fantastic. The other pages here also look really clean. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, great. So I think what we can do is we could probably just feed in these directly and say, I want you to build the onboarding just like this. So I'm going to scroll down here and I'll say, these are the 4 onboarding screens. I want you to design the app onboarding screens to look exactly like this. I want you to standardize the design, the colors, and everything so that it follows this structure. And I want you to screenshot loop over and over and over again until you get it down so that it's just about pixel perfect. There are minor changes in position of certain buttons, etc. So it doesn't need to be exactly pixel perfect with the placement of elements, but it should look the exact same outside of that. Okay, and then I think what I'm going to do now that it's generated this, I'll say, this looks excellent. I want you to isolate all of the assets, all of the, let's say, image assets in these mockups. So the trees, the backgrounds, etc., and give them to me as images so I can import them into the app. Okay. So now what it's going to do is actually like extract the asset. So it should extract this picture, for instance. It should extract these, for instance. It should extract this image and so on and so forth. I can't actually do this, I can't actually proceed until we get those images. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new folder here and I'll call this images. You can find the images for each section in images. And then I'm just going to upload all the images there. And this is going to be kind of hit or miss. I mean, obviously some of this design may not necessarily be reproducible procedurally, right? Like for instance, this little button background, it's kind of like patchy, almost like a watercolor. Same thing with this. And I mean, where are we going to get an animation that looks like that, right? I'm not entirely sure. But I think we can probably get most of it, which is what's important. There are also minor kind of issues with this. For instance, this is like an AI generated artifact. These images of these trees aren't all the same, which is kind of funny because obviously we're generating them with AI, but when they're in our app, they'll all be the same. And then we need to make sure these number of trees actually matches. I like this. This is a lot clearer than whatever Claude just generated before. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. It's now actually finalizing the image call. Cool, and we actually have some of these already, which is nice. I think Claude is going to have to know to cut this image, in order to get the right section of the trees and stuff. So that's going to be a little tough, but I think we could still do this. I'm going to save, we'll call this, I don't know, trees or something. I'm going to go back here. Then in images, I'm just going to drag in this. Oh, you know what? I don't think we can actually do that, unfortunately. We have to open the folder in Finder first. And then we can go here and drag this into images. And then I don't know why that's not allowing me to actually feed this in images. There we go. Some of these images feature multiple mockups. So you'll have to cut, crop, divide the image as needed. Before proceeding, perform these cut, crops, divisions so that you end up with a straightforward list of assets for the app. And I'm just going to copy all these in sort of one by one. Oh, this looks great. Look at this. This is fantastic. So I guess this grows into this. Oh, not necessarily. It looks like we have different colors here, which I think is important too. So anyway, we'll download this as well. And then rather than, make this really complex, I think I'm just going to feed this image in, like all of these images in one at a time. I'll go back here. This is a lot of app images. I'm going to save that. Why don't I save that? Why don't I save that? We can also, I don't know about these buttons. I think I'm going to do everything but these buttons. So now go back here, and then what do we need? We need all 3 of these. So now I'm just going to drag them all in. You can see for whatever reason, these didn't actually make it. So there you go. Okay. I'm going to go back here, and then I'll say, think hard as you chop them up. Important we get this right. Once done with that, loop over infinitely until the design is close to pixel perfect. Okay. This should now be everything that we need in order to actually design it to that style, which is quite nice. App is already starting to come together. Notice how the fonts and the colors and everything like that look a lot better. We just have a background of this image right now, which is kind of black and white. And I think that's just because of the way that the mockups were made. So obviously we're going to have to remove that background. But yeah, this onboarding screen's already looking a lot better. Cool. So we have what looks to be pretty solid. The only issue I would say is this section here of like the nice blue sky looks a little odd. Right? There's just something here with the nice blue sky slowly fading in that I don't think looks as good as it could. There's also some artifacting, it looks like, from the background removal on this image that we should remove. So yeah, we just need to find a way to basically like make the top a little cleaner, I would say, and then it'll look great. But all that's pretty good so far. I mean, I like the imagery and I like the way that it looks. Okay, top corners of these images. Let's say, okay, bottom is now great, but the top corners of these images still look square, a bit square. Could we make the gradients come in a bit more, but only on the top? And I think the idea there is that will basically give us more circular, basically. That'll basically give us like a nice little like rounded circle, and then we won't even really cue into the idea that it's a, you know, an image square that we're using. And yeah, I mean, like that is gorgeous, right? Like that's pretty nice. I like this a lot. All right, app's looking a lot better now. I really like this. Basically what we did is we just applied like a little gradient of this blue, almost like a mask right around this, almost like an arch. I think we could probably make it just 10% stronger. So I will do that. But as we go through the app here, you can see that, you know, aside from some image artifacting, we actually have something that looks pretty good. Granted, this is an app, right? And we also have dynamic resizing and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. I like that. And yeah, I mean, we basically have like a good onboarding page now. So I'm just going to proceed in this vein and replace all the assets with the AI image generated ones and then circle back when I'm done. All right, perfect. This now looks exactly like how I wanted it to. Very organic, and you can see it's sort of like built into the app. Grows as we go taller, and we don't have that weird sort of vertical line anymore, which is quite nice. So it's responsive. It's basically everything that we wanted. We can now move on. So you just fixed the onboarding. It now looks fantastic, but the rest of the app does not look anything like the onboarding. So we'll need to continue rolling out the generated images and assets through the rest of the app. Continue top to bottom, ensuring the design looks as similar as possible to the provided images. Take screenshots and loop as many times as you need to. You don't need to worry about the onboarding anymore since that's already done, but you do need to worry about the grow and the forest page. It should look identical to the images that I provided you inside of the images/folder. Okay, app is looking a lot better now. We have the seed right over here. We can tap on the time to change it, which is kind of handy. So we've removed that other section, making it even more visually simple. And then we can just click this little button and then our seed can grow. I want to add just 2 additional pieces of functionality. The first is when I tap on the seed, I kind of want it to like jiggle around a little bit. Add functionality so that when you tap on the seed, and really any tree on the grow page, there's slight haptics, and then it sort of jiggles around a bit, almost like it's organic or alive. And then change it so that you put the timer on top of the tree when you click on the start timer. What I mean by that is basically I want the seed to be sort of where this is right now, and then this will just be kind of up top, slowly counting down. I think that makes more sense, just because having this down below doesn't make sense if this is supposed to be like the ground. And you can see this is already growing, right? Which is quite nice. Looks really, really sexy that way. All right, cool. I mean, aside from that, if I go back to forest and come back, you see this is still operating, right? Which is quite nice. We've manually, well, not manually, but we've adjusted all of the trees that have grown so far. And you can see there are different types of trees. There's like evergreens, there's I don't know, there's a lot. When you tap on one, you can actually see the type of tree that was grown. Okay, and then you can also see the health of the tree, which is kind of neat. And anything that's withering, you can unwither just by tracking like time right now. So the oak is withering, for instance. For whatever reason, all 3 oaks are withering, unfortunately. But I don't know, your oak here looks pretty healthy, which is nice. You have the ability to tap on this as well. And yeah, I mean, like, I think this is the 80/24 set app. We've also changed the fonts and stuff too. I don't like what happened here. It looks like, okay, yeah, so we do have that organic jiggle. But for whatever reason, the timer there stopped when I kind of went back here. So I'm wondering if that is a persistent issue. No, that looks fine. We'll need to move that timer just a tiny bit higher. Move timer just a bit higher. Right now it's on top of the sprout. Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think we're just going to move that a little bit higher. And then I like how there's like kind of a seed here. Sorry, not a seed, a cloud. Higher, still going to be on top of the tree, the next animation change. So I think aside from that, maybe we just need more clarification around levels, and then we're done. I think that might be it. This just isn't really understanding that it's still on top of the... Okay, that looks better. I'm just going to sit here and... Well, I'm not going to wait. I'm just going to have it trigger all of the images so that I could see the tree and make sure that nothing kind of weird gets cut off. But yeah, after that, I think we're basically good to go. So more or less it. And that's what this looks like. As it grows, we have some weird cutoffs happening, so we will need to fix that, but it does look gorgeous. It's looking like a lot of these are cut off weirdly. Could you double check the source assets and ensure that we're not including additional trees above or below the main tree, and we're also not cutting them off, strangely? Yes, this is sort of our dev mode, and so you can see the pine and the trees and stuff like that grow. So I think when we fix this will look pretty gorgeous. So now this is, for instance, a large sakura. And we can only do this by like holding it down and giving it a click. But yeah, all these are beautiful. And the crystal tree, I think, is probably the coolest of all. So I'm going to take my trusty pen and now mark the design stage off. It's now time for me to test this end to end. So I'm going to do that using a combination of both Chrome and then the iPhone mirroring app, and then ultimately Expo just on my device. So, I mean, I'm just going to test this end to end now, and I'll do it off screen. But I have a bunch of functionality here. Like, I want to be able to tap this. I also want to be able to plant the seed. I want the timer to go up as I plant the seed. I have basically this little feature where I can now long press on it to change the sprout. So I'm just going to run through all that. And then I'm also just going to go through the entire forest top to bottom and ensure that this functionality actually lines up. Like, for instance, 2 trees withering, it says 3 here. So just going to go do a little end-to-end pass and then circle back. All right, after a little bit of back and forth, maybe a little bit too much back and forth, we've now done all the testing as well. So all that means for us is the last thing that we need to do, well, not last thing, I guess we're sort of halfway through the process, but the next thing we have to do is we have to add a database. Same thing that you guys have seen me do multiple times. I'm just going to do this on Supabase. I'll head over to new project, and then I'm just going to call this Pomodoro app. Going to just have this select a password for me, generate one, and then I'll copy this and then enable automatic RLS as well. I'll head back over here to anti-gravity, and then I'll say Supabase time. I'm going to feed it in a bunch of information after this project's created. Same sort of flow. I'm just going to wait until all this stuff is set up, and then I'm going to copy the project URL, publishable key, direct connection string, etc. Okay, and then taking a look, they just built 3 different tables, sessions, trees, and then user stats. The database looks more or less like this. So we have a bunch of IDs for all the trees that get made. We have user stats as well. So like my level, my XP, we have some session information, and so on and so forth. And then on the authentication end, we have confirm email here, which I'm just going to turn off. And I'm just doing that because it's going to be a lot easier for us. And now I'm, again, just going to test this app end to end. So I think this is localhost. Is it 8081? Probably. Okay, cool. And now we have welcome back. Your forest is waiting for you. So this looks pretty cute. I don't think the seed is good enough. I think what we're realistically gonna have to do is just change it. But then again, that's what the testing is for. And then I can sign in. Oh, I haven't actually created an account yet. So let's just pretend. And okay, it's jumped us directly over to this page. We need the onboarding page. So I'm going to move back and have it make that change. All right, we had quite a few headaches on that end, unfortunately. I have yet to fully change all of the app icons and sprites as well. I realized that some of the app icons I used for this just don't work. It's not even that they were cut off weirdly. It's just when they were generated. Sorry, like they are cut off weirdly. When they were generated in this grid pattern, and then AI kind of chopped them up. So what I have to do is I basically have to go to ChatGPT and say, hey, can you replace these, and just generate them one at a time. Otherwise, it just takes forever for Claude to figure out exactly where the bounding boxes are. And honestly, I think GPT Image 2, despite me having to spend maybe 10 to 20 cents to get this done, will probably just do a better job And then I can also specify I want you to remove the background and so on and so forth and whatever. So a couple of additional things I'm going to do there. But just because I'm about actually to head out to celebrate Mother's Day, I'm going to move forward to the security audit and then finally wrap it up with a final test before deploy. So how do I do my security audit? So you guys remember there is a vibe coding security page right over here. So I can actually just go copy from all the way down up to this section, security audit prompt. Now I'm just going to feed this into AI, same as usual. So first thing to do is clear. So actually like clear and get all this all the way up to the very top. And then now when it has 0 tokens remaining, I'm just going to paste in that security audit. And let's just run through the entire thing end to end. And also, if it's not clear, this isn't a process that you're only going to do once. Again, you're ideally going to do this a couple times, maybe 2-3 times run through. And don't pay attention to that SHA cancellation message up there. I just had to deal with an internet issue quickly because I'm moving places. Boy, were there a lot of problems with that app. I think that this is probably one of the prettier ones that I've designed. And I really like the idea of having AI generate visuals without a background and then modifying those visuals, aka, in this case, having a sprite sort of grow over time. There are some additional things I could have done to optimize the functioning of this particular app. Like, for instance, I could have, compress these images so that they load a little faster on mobile. These are things that obviously you can do. And if you want to do them, then, anytime you have like an app that is image heavy or anything like that, just add that as sort of a dedicated step before you finish. I should also note you can automate large portions of this whole process as well. I wanted to do it manually a few times to run you guys through, but for instance, you could just immediately pass this diagram into your Claude instance and then have it generate like a list of steps, Claude.md, and just have it ask you questions about the app you want to make. Then it could automatically kick off a series of changes that first build it, then find maybe the top 3 app designs out there, and then try and design the app like those apps. Maybe it could automate all of the Chrome testing. Can't really do that on your phone, unfortunately, just kind of how it is. You would still have to manually do those steps, but then you could, have it run through the process of creating a Supabase database and, doing all that stuff automatically based off of best practices before finally doing that Chrome test again and then employing the security audit. And in fact, that's actually what I've done. I've set up a big Claude.md file. Again, that is like your system prompt that just contains a bunch of information about my framework and what I like doing. And when I actually create an app in my new workspace, the one that handles my new app designs, it's quite straightforward. It's literally like, hey, just ask me all the questions. And then it just asks me a bunch of questions. I answer those questions granularly, and then it works together with me to come up with a big plan before ultimately deploying them. So pretty cool stuff, eh? I'm just running this another time to catch all the security issues that we had the first time, and then, see if our solution has caused any additional security issues to crop up. Not a very big deal there. And it's looking like a few of these have actually flipped. Previously, they were fine, and now I think get user versus get session is actually broken, so that's kind of annoying. I'm just going to run through and have it implement the changes just like I did the other time. So great work. Run through and implement all changes to move the I'll just say move any yellows or reds to greens. Pass. I'm going to feed that in because I know now that it's done everything, and it has. Now that we're strong, we can basically just do the implementation, and then I'll run it through one more time. And yeah, you can see a bunch of these things were right because that's what it did the last time, unfortunately. Just going to wait for that to queue, and then I'll circle back when it's all ready to go. And boy, is that cool. I just went through a couple of sign up and onboarding flows, and just doing it one final run through. But man, the haptic feedback when you hold down on the little seed and then it like jiggles, that's really sick. Also, despite the much higher resolution display of my phone versus my computer, the pictures look extremely clean. And just happy to say that this is just so much better than anything I could have imagined. I planted a seed now for the last couple of minutes, and I got like a cute little sprout going. The first thing in my forest has been planted. This is one of those apps that I could actually very clearly see myself using. And what's funny is it's very simple. I find that best apps typically aren't the ones that like pack the most functionality or feature, but they just have, as mentioned, a core kind of loop that you just want to return to over and over and over again. In this case, I could either use the timer on my phone. Don't get me wrong, I could, but why wouldn't I click this button and just see a cute little tree blossom? I have accountability. There's a form of engagement here. I get push notifications saying like, hey, your tree is withering. Check in on X, Y, and Z. I think I could probably make this significantly more complex. I could add like crazy progress trackers and stuff like that, but I'm actually totally happy with my little Pomodoro habit tracker. And with all that said, now that I've done this whole build end to end, a process I think that I've completed 3 times now, why don't we actually push something to the App Store? And I think because I want this to be, I want to use like the more complex app, which is probably the calendar AI app. Sorry, the Cal Tracker or AI app. I'm going to use that as like my push mechanism instead of this. But I want you to know that you can employ the exact same step that I'm about to show you, or a series of steps on whatever app you want, whether it's this Pomodoro one, whether it's the habit tracker one you built initially, or whether it's something else that you built on your end. And it's fairly straightforward. I just got to go run to Mother's Day, and I'll be back after giving you guys info about how to set all this stuff up. All right, so I've actually compiled a full end-to-end guide in this Google Doc right here, which walks you through everything you need to know from the moment that your Expo app is finished, aka, ready to go, all the way up until you have a submitted app on the App Store. And so this is going to be the source doc that I go through as I actually do the app submission. Now, I want you guys to know right off the bat that there's no guarantee that you'll actually get your app onto the App Store. They have, relatively rigorous lists of rules and procedures, and you guys will see all the BS that I have to go through actually, putting this app through. Done it a couple times now, and it just never ceases to amaze me how you need to get your screenshots just right, and you need to have your privacy policies all set up. But whatever, that's just part of the game, right? I want you guys to know we're gonna go all the way up until the point that we submit the app. I'm going to show you guys how to do the App Store specifically, and I'm going to show you guys like an alternative that you can use if you want to push it out to the Play Store as well. And you don't need to know a lot of the development stuff that I'm going to be showing you guys. You can also, and like what I recommend is take this and feed it through Claude or another AI agent to have it actually automate a large portion of the procedure for you. So this guide has a bunch of prompts and stuff like that that you could use in order to, test your app. Let me run you guys through kind of what the process actually looks like. So once you're done the Expo app, and I'm assuming that you've already done, some form of end-to-end testing, what we need to do is we need to prepare for production. And so for this example, I'm going to use the calorie tracker app that I developed sort of in the middle of this course, simply because it's a little bit more complicated. There are a few more steps. So when I say prepare for production, I guess what I really mean is we need to make sure that the app is ready to go. We have all the bells and whistles and all the steps sort of in the right places. And then after we prepared it for production, we're going to build it, and then we're actually going to push it to, Apple. So how do we actually do the preparation for production? Well, basically, what we need to do is we need to generate a couple of things. We need to generate a few files like app.json. Now, this just includes a bunch of fields that Apple uses to call your app a specific thing. So think about like the name of your app, for instance. Think about like the identifier. I don't know if you guys have ever been onto the actual App Store and seen, but all apps have versions as well. Obviously, all apps have icons of some kind. So we need to generate this file. We also need to generate this EAS JSON as well, which is specific for Expo. We need to do things like come up with the app icon, the splash screen. When you push to Android, assume you're also doing that, you need an adaptive icon, which is basically some sort of foreground image on a colored background. And I think that's because, dark mode and light mode. And so the thing is, this is going to seem pretty complicated and pretty difficult. And you're like, man, I don't know how to do all this stuff. I just want to develop the app and push it out. But what's really cool is Claude can actually do all this for you really easily. So all you really have to do is just take this and then go to whatever the workspace is that you have, okay? And then just pump in this app.json and eas.json. So it's just going to run through a quick configuration. Now we should note that I've already actually prepped some of this stuff ahead of time, but it's just going to run through and then, go through either create it if it hasn't already been created, and then just walk you through the various things that you need to do in order to get it all up and running. So you can see in my case, I actually have already set the stuff up, a pixel width of 1024 by 1024. My image is called public.png. Here's a bunch more data. Here's also a bunch of stuff about the app. So track your calories and macros effortlessly with Cal Tracker. This is all stuff that Claude will put together for you, basically. There are some permissions that you might have to, adjust and kind of add runtime version policies or whatever, and then it'll just go through, it'll apply fixes. Some of this stuff is automatically generated for you as you develop the app, but you should do this final step basically before you proceed to make sure everything is 100% good. So anyway, it's gone through and it's actually fixed all this stuff, with these permissions and stuff like that, identified that because our app needs, I guess, some audio while it's using the camera, we need to put all this stuff in. And afterwards, it's going to confirm your Apple ID, assuming that you've already set it up. And if not, we're going to set it up in the next section. Once it's prepared, what we need to do is we need to actually build for production. And what you need to understand is that apps sort of exist in a few stages. There's like your local test app, which is sort of what we were doing here with Expo, where it's running sort of like a live development version for us that we can adjust and tweak in real time. But then when apps actually make it onto like a real device on the App Store, what happens is we take this big amorphous thing that we're constantly editing and changing, and we basically make it really concrete. We sort of crystallize the app by building it, and building it just like sets a bunch of these parameters automatically so that it runs a lot faster. And so what we need to do now that we've sort of prepared our app for production is we need to build it for production. Okay, and the way that you do this, just moving down a little bit, it'll give you a bunch of terminal commands and stuff like that. But what I'll do is I'll go back over here and I'll say, okay, let's build it now. I'm just going to paste this in. So it's going to run through this step, see if EAS CLI is already installed, and then it'll also give you the ability to log into EAS. You might be wondering what EAS is. That's just the Expo system that we've been using up until now. Okay, so I'm just going to open up a terminal, and let me just clear all this stuff. Now, the thing is, I'm already in this cal tracker directory, but if I'm not, say, give me command with CD. And what this will do is it'll allow you to open any terminal window and then move to the correct directory. CD just stands for change directory. If you're not in the directory when you run the command, then there'll be a problem. So I'm just going to assume that I'm not. And then it'll ask you to log in. So I'm actually already logged in as, whatever my account name is. If you're not logged in, you'll have to run through that login. Again, this is something that you will have already set up at this point in the program. Why? Because you will have already gone to, EAS and signed up for an Expo account, like when we had to do the iPhone mirroring thing. If you're not already signed up, you can do so just by heading to expo.dev/signup. Once you're done, just tell it that you are logged in, and you can actually go through the process of building the production app. And so I'm logged in now to my account. And you can see it's now running through like the portal ID and the build and all this stuff. Because we're doing this for free, they have like a free tier queue, which takes a lot longer to build than if you were to like pay for it. Expo is a service that basically just takes all of the work that we've done and then automates the process of, submitting to the App Store. Believe it or not, submitting to the App Store used to be even more of a pain in the butt before Expo came around, not to mention the testing and so on and so forth. While that's working, make sure you have an Apple developer account set up. So just head over to developer.apple.com/account. Then also a Google Play console developer account. You do that by going to play.google.com/console/u/0/signup. Both of these are ever changing, so I don't really want to, make this video super concrete by walking you through the actual steps. But in general, you're going to need a couple of things. You're going to need to, make an Apple account unless you already have one. You're going to need to create a profile here, give it some information about who you are and what you like and so on and so forth. Give them their email address, verify your email address and so on and so forth, and then do the same thing here. One little tip I'll give you guys for the Google Play console developer account is when you select your organization or type, I'd actually make sure that one, you have a business email here, not just like an average @gmail.com. You can do that just by setting up like a Google workspace account really simply. So I can do that by just moving over to nick@leftclick.ai over here, and I can click on my little developer account. When you do this and you go through the whole sign up, it's just a lot faster because you will have already done a lot of the verification on Google's end, like when you set up the Google Workspace email. That, costs $6 or $7 a month to have your little Google Workspace email running, but I'm assuming you guys want to do this as a business. You should probably have a business email, nick@leftclick.ai. That's the name of my agency, for instance. Once you're done with that, you'll also have to verify you have access to an Android mobile device. They won't actually allow you to do any of this stuff unless you have an Android, which I think kind of makes sense, right? I mean, they're not trying to make money off of you by being like, go buy an Android, but you do have to proceed through the process of like testing it on your Android phone. They want to make sure that whatever app you build is good. Okay, so anyway, after you're done with all this stuff, the build will go through. We'll move on to the next section. So now we built for production. I'm assuming you guys already have an Apple developer account set up and an App Store Connect sign up. Now we need to deal with privacy and compliance and then submit the build. So privacy and compliance is going to vary depending on if you're going through the Apple developer submission or the App Store submission. I want you guys to know that they're very similar. The shapes of them are a little different. Like you have to do, I don't know, like they put all the form fields and stuff like that differently if it's your Apple developer account or your App Store. But like it's all the same thing. You got to come up with screenshots. You got to come up with your icons. You got to come up with a big description of your app. You basically have to optimize your little landing page for the app and make sure your app works before you submit it. So what I'll do here, just to save you guys a bunch of time, is I'll just show you a high-level overview of the CalTracker app submission for Apple. And then it's a very similar sort of one-to-one move over if you want to do stuff for the App Store. Now, the privacy and compliance is probably like the most laborious step here, because in order to set up the privacy and compliance, these platforms actually force you to have a web accessible landing page set up with like a privacy page and then like a compliance kind of like policy. It's a pain in the ass to do. Luckily, I Actually, I already have one of these for CalTracker/privacy. And this is what mine looks like. So this is my website here, Left Click, right? It's my agency. It's where we build things for companies using AI technology like this. And the way that this CalTracker privacy policy works is I literally just fed it in the entire page of like the Apple app submission guidelines. And I said, hey, I'm coming up with an app called CalTracker. Can you create a privacy policy and then host it on, my website? And so that's what this whole page is right over here. You can see there's like a way to contact me and stuff like that. There are a couple of other pages as well. There's like a support page here, which you'll also have to set up. And, the reason why I do everything using AI is just it's so fast to like create a web page like this. I literally just said, hey, make me a web page, host it on my website. You're good to go, right? Like that was like, boom, it was 2 seconds. I didn't even have to come up with any of the text. I just had to feed it like the requirement of what was asked. It did things like, how accurate are the AI nutrition estimates? Well, they're approximate. They should be used as a guide, not the end all be all. How do I set up my Anthropic API key? Hey, here's how to do it, right? And it sets up the guide and everything. So I guess what I'm saying is like, in order to proceed with the step, you are going to have some web accessible resource that ideally is at the same domain as your email. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but yeah, ideally you would have all that stuff set up. In terms of the actual app page, when you actually go to do the submission, let me show you guys what that looks like. When you're done, what you can do is go to this link. Okay, that'll open up your Expo account. I don't think I actually am signed in right now, which is why I'm getting this page. So let me just sign in. Then when you head over to builds, you can actually see it right here. So iOS App Store build. Okay, give that button a quick click. And here is basically the whole walkthrough of everything. So this is like the finished file basically, which is referred to as a .ipa. So with this .ipa file here, you can actually go click submit to an app store, and then you could run through these submission steps. I'm going to copy that. Okay, assuming that you have everything set up, all your privacy policies and whatnot. So what you do is you then type EAS submit platform iOS. And if you're not already logged in, right, you are going to have to do that login procedure. And if you receive an error saying like, I don't know, your IDs aren't matched up or whatever, just feed the error into Claude. Claude can walk you through that process. But after you're done, you just say, what would you like to submit? Well, I want to select a build from EAS, which is the service that I just used. So click that. And you'll see there are a couple of IDs here. Okay, these are all just different apps that I've sort of done. This is 23 hours ago yesterday. This is a slightly different ID. So now I can actually press ID. Now I need to log into my Apple developer account, which I already created. So I'll do that now. Because I already have like a key on my computer, it just automated the process of logging in. And now you can actually see the App Store connects API key and everything. This is basically just hooked up to my App Store. And at the bottom, I have this big link. So what I can do is I can open the link. That'll take me back to this page, which is now called an iOS App Store submission. Again, this is being managed by Expo. On the left-hand side here, you can see we have a bunch of different steps. There's builds, there's submissions, there's a couple of other things. You can actually do over-the-air updates through Expo, which is pretty cool. But once the actual App Store Connect is submitted, which will take somewhere between 3 to maybe 5 minutes or so, there'll be a little link down here that we'll click. That'll actually take us to the submission page. The submission page is going to look something like this. We see up here, it says CalTracker by Nick. The reason why I have this little logo is just what Claude created for me. And I've already done this specific submission just because I wanted to save us some time and show you guys how straightforward it is. But basically what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to drag a bunch of screenshots for the 6.5-inch display iPhone right over here. So that's what I did with my app. And I didn't come up with any of this stuff. I just had Claude do it all for me. You'll also need to do the same thing for an iPad. And I think what's interesting is the iPad automatically generates a bunch of other variants for you too. But iPhone and iPad, these are kind of annoying to do, of course, but again, Claude does it all automatically now. It'll actually open up your browser, take screenshots. The promotional text over here, I just copy and pasted from Claude. Description, just copy and pasted from Claude. Keywords, here's the support URL. Okay, so you do need a support URL. Remember what I talked about earlier? That's what I pasted in there. If I copy and paste this in, you'll see I'm on that page. You need a marketing URL, which is just like your homepage for whatever the website is. Not a big deal. Version number should be 1.0. Set your copyright to whatever it is. I mean, in my case, it's my company. As you proceed and go down, you'll need to select a build. So I selected just the build that I just submitted to Expo. So we need to tie this to a particular build. And, we've submitted the build to the App Store, so it's all good. Right over here, you need a required sign-in. So now this is interesting. It's a login that an actual human reviewer on the App Store end will use to sign into your app and test the functionality. So right over here, we have teste@gmail.com, T3ST!414. That's like the username and the password. And then, I'm saying you can basically just sign up or whatever to do anything you want. And then I always recommend going automatically release this version. Okay, now, unfortunately, this is just one of the many pages here. You actually have a lot to go through. You have the app information, which is where you choose the name. So I just said CalTracker by Nick, just because this is a demo and I want you guys to see it. After you're done with that, you need to fill out the age ratings, all the content rights, the category, and everything like that. Once you're done with that, I just proceed top to bottom. You have app reviews. This one's currently waiting for review, submitted yesterday, and then you can also see the history. Continue proceeding, we have app privacy. So this is where you add your privacy policy. You can also add a user privacy choices URL. You don't need to do that. It's not required. It's optional. If something's optional, it'll tell you, and I recommend just skipping. Product page preview, data types. And then you literally just proceed top to bottom, filling out everything that it says that you have to do. And it's annoying, for sure. If something is optional, it'll specifically tell you. In my case, a lot of the growth and marketing stuff are optional. For pricing, you do have to select a schedule. So that's what I did here. I just made it free. And then there are a few other things you have to do as well. Like if there are any in-app purchases, you need to be really clear about what they are. Then you also have to make sure that your app is not gambling. Okay, anyway, once all that stuff is done, what you do is in the top right-hand corner, you'll have a little button that says Submit for Review. And then you can just click that button and it'll actually be sent to Apple to go through that whole process on their end. Okay, so I've done that now with the CalTracker. And as mentioned, there's no way I can guarantee that this app actually makes it onto the App Store. Obviously, all we can do is we could significantly improve the chances by making sure that we have all the pages and stuff like that. If the review turns out that our app isn't good, typically the reviewers will provide at least some sort of guidance or steps that you need to take in order to make sure that your app can make it. And it's just up to you how deep into it you want to go. What's cool, obviously, is that I have this whole guide here, which walks you through it end to end. So if this video ends up insufficient for whatever reason, you can also just compare this. And then, sort of diagrammatically, this is more or less it. You just do the same process over and over and over again every single time you want to go through, an actual submission. And then this post-launch step down here, this is honestly mostly just your growth and your marketing. And, earlier on the App Store submission page, down here where it says product page optimization, custom product pages, promo codes, game center, all this stuff. This is sort of how you optimize the app once it's launched, once you've had a couple of users. I should also note, it's kind of weird to just build the app and then launch it and submit it to the App Store immediately. Typically, you're going to want to do some testing. So there's a feature here on the App Store Connect called Test Flight, which allows you, before you roll out the app, to push this to people, within your network, to give them a link that allows them to download your app sort of secretly. Typically, you actually do want to push this to a few real users to go through, test your app for you, tell you if anything isn't working or is kind of janky. But obviously, I can't really do that here. I can't go through a big test feature period for 2 weeks because I want to publish this video and give you guys that value. So test flight is a very viable alternative. And then, make sure that after your test flight kind of distribution, you can then do and distribution, you can then do analytics and you can see how things are going and optimize your app. And that's that. Thank you guys very much for joining and completing this journey of mobile app development in Claude Code. Had a lot of fun putting it together for you, and I absolutely love doing end-to-end courses like this. So yeah, certainly hoping you learned something. If you guys like these sorts of courses, I also have a seminal 4-hour Claude Code course that walks you guys through all the icons and little buttons and widgets, context management, really in-depth prompt engineering, and so on and so forth. So now that you've sort of seen a top-down version of how to build things with Claude Code, sort of playing around with and learning by doing. If you want a much more bottom-up and comprehensive curriculum, definitely check that out. That'll be down below in the description. I also have a bunch of advanced Claude Code courses that teach you things like, how to optimize skills for knowledge work, how to get up and running with advanced sub-agent or multi-agent orchestration, and so on and so forth. Now, if you guys have got to the point where you know how to build stuff, the natural next question is, what do I do with all of my skills? And a route that many people take is monetizing those skills through providing it as a service. And if you guys want to learn how to do that, I also run a community called Maker School that is a 90-day money-back guarantee, where if you don't get your first client by the end of a 90-day period, I will actually give you all of your money back. It has probably the highest completion rates of any online community out there. We've won the school games many times in a row. I was actually the #1 community on school for, gosh, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 months. I went down to Los Angeles, met with Alex Hormozy and Sam Evans, and so on and so forth, and actually taught a bunch of people how to build great high engagement, high quality communities where people actually achieve their stated outcomes. So yeah, definitely check that out. Over 2,000 other people are currently learning how to sell these sorts of technologies through a variety of means. We do lead gen through cold email, I show you guys how to construct, DM sequences to send to people. I show you guys how to build your own social media brands and also build like lead generation funnels that don't rely on referrals, like I think a lot of people are unfortunately forced to. Anyway, I'll stop tooting my own horn, but you make it to the end of a 4-hour course, probably going to be at least a couple minutes of advertising. Hopefully you guys appreciated it as mentioned, and if you guys have any ideas for future videos, just leave them down below. I'm more than happy to read the comments and then get inspired. I'll see all y'all in the next one. Take care. Oh, and please subscribe to the channel. Hate asking for people, but that significantly helps my reach. Take care, everybody.